Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday night edition of Spaced Out Radio. My name is Dave Scott. So glad all of you are with us tonight as we'll have Michael Schratt, in my opinion, one of the greatest historians of aviation in United States history. He will be with us momentarily. Dirty Filth will be coming in a little bit late for another cartoon. But the main thing is we have all of you here with us tonight. Let us say hello to race fan in the gold medal position, the attorney at large, Michael Morris, and then Robert Lamoth with a bronze medal tonight. We have Chris 716, Roy Boy, and Road Flare. Thanks for joining us. Rat Sass, Major Lee is here. Major Lee will be signing autographs after the show. Line up to the left of the studio if you don't mind. To the left of the studio. John Lobin, how you doing, man? Stephanie Kenny Blankenship. Kevin, Corey, Lost Souls, thank you for coming on in. Hello there, Simon the Likeable. Deborah Norsworthy, how you doing? Good to see you. Excuse me. It got cold tonight. It got real cold here tonight. Sandra Kincaid, Mama Catherine, mwah. This one's for you, my dear. Love you. And Griff, nice to see you all. Kurt M., Tim Mothman, and Tim Mothman's goatee. Thank you for joining us, both of you. Mennonite Abe, Roger Murray, what is happening? And Jenny White Bear, we love you, my dear. Jimmy Gonzalez and Millennium, my man, good to see you. And there he is. Doug Shelby is here. The Doug Shelby has arrived, which means we can officially start this show. Ann Palmer, Thomas Rock, nice to have you here. Marty Burback and T-Bone, how you guys doing? And who else do we have in our chat room tonight? Alien Critter and Bar Madison. Bar Madison will be signing autographs after the show as well. Line up to the right of the studio, if you don't mind. To the right of the studio. Chillgasm, D. Cypher, good to see you both. Hi, Christine Lynn. Dennis Zuniga, it's been a while. How you doing, my favorite vet? Good to have you here. Thank you for your service. As we continue on with roll call, there's our man Zed Hutt and JBD. Welcome to SOR Chat. Continuing on with roll call, Laura Lobbs, Welsh Hammer, Grant and his lip blade. You never called me back. I'm a little upset with you. So call me back next time. Continuing on here, we have Linda Webb. Welcome to SOR Chat. Little Robbie G and his red goatee. How you doing, buddy? Buckethead, my man. How's the soothsayer tonight? The lovely and talented Kira. Kathy Evans. How you guys doing? Thank you for joining us. Vanessa Grant Morris, welcome to SOR Chat. Continuing on, we have Jay Burke and Big Logic. Welcome to SOR Chat as well. A lot of new faces here tonight. Thank you. Don't forget to hit subscribe and ring that bell. Cliff Sy, good to see you. Les Paul Holland, hope you're strumming up a guitar for us. And Troy Dudley, one of the Dudley boys right there. He'll put you through a table. Continuing on, Dino Bravo fan, thank you for joining us. 1971 Marmaduke. Yes, I know it's Marduk, but Marmaduke seems so much more fun. I remember the Marmaduke cartoons. They were amazing. Hold on. Let's start the radio side. And we welcome in everybody on the radio and podcast side of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. We are going to have Michael Schratt on the show tonight talking about UFO crash retrievals, and we are in for a good one. as we await the arrival of Bill WD-40 into the Spreaker chat room to lube us up for tonight's show, because you always want to go into a show nice and smooth. Nick Adkins, how you doing? Thank you for joining us. And who else do we have here? Scrolling on down. We are caught up so far. Reminder to all of you, the Super Chat is open. It's a wonderful way to support what we do on this show on a nightly basis. As well, you can shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. We do not have ugly swag, people. We have clothes that you actually want to wear. And we're going to be changing some of that up here very, very soon. Ant-Man, how you doing? Hello, Bill WD-40 in the Spreaker chat. Much appreciate your love and support. Michael Schratt coming on up here momentarily as we get ready to rock out tonight. I'm looking forward to this one. And, of course, don't forget May 10th through 12th, 2024 at the Silver Legacy Casino Resort in Reno, Nevada, the 3rd annual SOR Fan Party. Info at spacedoutradio.com. From the mountains of central British Columbia to you listening around the world, this, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. We welcome you to tonight's show on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on Odyssey Radio, TalkStream Live, and KPNL. All of our archives are free. Join us at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. You can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon at the SOR Space Travelers Club. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Tonight's show is brought to you by Chive Charities. Help make the world 10% happier by visiting Chive Charities today. You can find them on our website. We got a power show of information tonight. It's going to be absolutely awesome. Michael Schratt is here talking about UFO crash retrievals over the last number of decades. It's going to be a great one. He's one of the most brilliant minds in ufology today. Then in hour number 3, Steve Stockton from Among the Missing joins us with another creepy story. Right after that, we have Super Duke with the Cryptid Report. Let's hammer it down. Michael Schratt is a private pilot, military aerospace historian. He has lectured across the United States and around the world on the unique subject of mystery aircraft and classified propulsion systems buried deep within the military-industrial complex. He's been a guest lecturer even at air shows like the big OSHKOSH event. That's the world's largest air show. Michael has developed a number of contacts who have had firsthand experience dealing with classified black programs, including former fighter pilots, retired naval personnel, and aerospace engineers. And his love? UFOs, UFO crash retrievals, and recreating through AI art what it actually looks like. Michael Schratt, a good friend of Spaced Out Radio. It is always good to have you back on the show. How are you?
Doing good, Dave. Good to be with you.
Michael, for our audience who may not fully understand your impact in ufology, I literally have to say, and I said it before, I'll say it again, I think you are one of the most brilliant minds in ufology today. And the fact that you are, we can also call you a good friend of Spaced Out Radio, is a very big win for us. So thank you for everything that you do to help bring these stories out, my friend.
Thank you. Glad to do it. Thank you.
We're going to be talking a lot about crash retrievals tonight. Why is this a subject that is very close to your heart?
Because as we're going to get into this, and I'm going to share my screen a little bit later here, we're going to go over the drawings, we're going to go over the illustrations, we're going to go over the original sketches from the military witnesses. The reason why I feel that this is so important and why this is going to be the vehicle that drives this whole field forward is because the UFO crash retrievals contain the body, the debris, and the craft, all three wrapped up in one type of system. And that's what we're going to need to move this field forward, because it's going to be that information that gets handed into the scientific community as a united coalition, which will help push this forward. Anything less than, I just personally think we're spinning our wheels. It's going to be the crash retrievals that do it.
Yeah, and you know what? It's nothing more hot than this topic right now. It has been talked about on all the news networks. Tucker Carlson on X, the news network, News Nation is all over this, going in about the CIA UFO crash retrievals that allegedly the CIA is in holding of 9 UFO craft, which I don't know if you recognize this, but when I heard that earlier today, my friend, went 9 craft that they allegedly have that are UFOs. Yes. Well, who told us that back in 1989? Oh, yes, Mr. Bob Lazar, a friend of yours and a friend of Jim Goodall's as well.
Yep, I know the story well, like everybody else does, and it's a very interesting number that they've picked, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, and you know what? It's weird how over the years, I mean, one thing about the field of ufology, Mike, is that we have loved to criticize somebody like Bob Lazar for decades now, calling him everything from a thief to a liar to a criminal to somebody who was never there. He can't prove his existence. He can't prove anything. Yet all of these little details seem to always come to fruition in truth. Do you find that as well?
Well, when you start going through these cases, you start seeing this common denominator running through a lot of these. And I hope to get into some of that tonight.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely amazing how it goes through. All right, Michael, the importance of crash retrievals and the fact that we have unidentified technology from maybe non-human intelligence, to use one of the catchy terms that's going around these days. Are you surprised that we are finally getting into this conversation publicly?
Nah, it's way overdue. You know, the things that Leonard Stringfield tracked down decades ago, we're beyond pushing the undertaker now. A lot of these witnesses are long gone. So to me personally, this is the final curtain call on UFO disclosure. This is the final curtain call on crash retrievals. I mean, we can't push this any longer. We can't keep kicking the can down the road another 10, 20 years. We can't. It's got to happen now. We need to make a management decision, take the bull by the horns, and get to the actual physical hardware, the physical evidence. That's what we need.
Why do we need this? Why is it so important to not only humanity, but our survival? Why is this needed?
One of the reasons is fairly easy to determine. It's because the propulsion systems associated with these vehicles would free us from the oil industry, from the oil cartels. It would take internal combustion engines and make them obsolete overnight. It would take out coal fire plants, the nuclear power plants, the solar, the wind farms. All of this, the multi-trillion-dollar utilities would be basically bankrupt overnight, pushing us into a whole new world, a whole new society. This is the critical juncture that we're at right now.
Okay, I understand that, but we are literally, if this came through, I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second. If this came to fruition, where are the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people around the world who are going to immediately be jobless? What are they going to do in order to survive here?
I don't think they'll be jobless. It'll open a completely brand new revolutionary type system of building, of manufacturing. We're no longer going to be pounding nails into square boards anymore. Architecture will be different. Transportation will be different. We'll need people to design these new electrogravitic craft. All the housing will be changed. I think it's going to be the beginning of a brand new renaissance.
That, the way you put it that way, with it being a brand new renaissance, that is exciting. But do we need the aliens here in order to create that renaissance?
Well, as Greer had mentioned, we're 100 years behind where we should be right now. Gordon Cooper mentioned the same thing. He physically stated that we're 100 years behind where we should be right now. So we're long overdue for this. We're ready for it. We are ready for this.
Okay, and I can see that. Okay, because you being an aviation historian, I don't know about you, but when I look in the sky, when I see an airliner fly over,
Right.
that's 1950s technology. Yes, the plane has been upgraded for safety and computers and how to handle weather and turbulence and everything along those lines, Michael. But still, it still takes 5.5 hours to fly from New York to Washington State, where we should be able to do that. What, less than an hour and a half? Maybe?
Just to talk about what you mentioned right there, Dave, is because in 1969, the 747 made its first flight. It's been over 50 years. We're not flying any faster now than we were 50 years ago. What's wrong with that picture? Right?
And that's my point. Like,
right.
if the United States is playing with, they've been playing with, the speed of sound for, since the 1950s, early 60s. Okay, we can only assume that they are playing with some sort of hyperspeed now. How the heck are we so behind?
Well, you can bet your bottom dollar that the military-industrial complex, in conjunction with the aerospace defense contractors, they figured out a way to eliminate the sonic boom signature. And going back to October 1954, they absolutely made a breakthrough in propulsion and gravity in aerospace. An absolute breakthrough was made. And you can follow the newspaper clippings that take you to October 1954 and prior to, where defense contractors, private industry, universities were desperately trying to crack the gravity barrier, and they've done it. They've done it, and they've left all of us behind. They've absolutely done it.
So why, in your opinion, Michael, are they
right.
holding on to this? What is the purpose?
One of the reasons why is because it's still profitable for the airline industry, for the major players like Boeing, to keep building 757s. 747 is now on its way out. But all the legacy aircraft, it's still profitable for them to do that. Why would they want to get rid of billions in dollars in profits if we can have this other vehicle that does away with all this? So it's still profitable for them to do this.
Well, you know what, Michael? You're making me a little bit sad here on a personal note, because my young son, who's 10, he's recently, over the last month or so, taken a keen interest in aviation. And you know what his favorite plane is?
Which one?
The Boeing 747.
Oh,
and he's been asking me lately, Dad, why are all of these airline companies not flying the 747 anymore? And I'm just like, I don't know, son. Cost, maybe. So you're killing me here by saying that they're phasing it out.
Well, we do have assets that are still under wraps. So we'll just say that. So. Mm-hmm.
Good. All right, Michael. Well, let's start getting into a little bit of crash retrieval here, because this is the reason why you are here tonight.
Okay.
How long has this been going on that we know?
Well, if you go back to Cape Girardeau, 1941, that would kind of be the unofficial beginning. But, we are getting reports prior to. We're getting reports from 1933 timeframe. We're getting reports for a little bit after 1942 timeframe. So I would say between 33 and 42, 46, that would be kind of the beginning framework of where we want to begin our discussion here. And if I can, I'd like to share my screen. Is it okay to do that?
Absolutely. Let's just make sure we describe it for our radio audience.
No problem. We'll go ahead and do that here. Let's see. Entire screen. Got that. Share. Okay, I'm going to close this down. I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to slideshow from beginning. Okay, so Dave, do you see this full screen?
I got it on screen right now.
Roger that. Okay, so we are going to begin this presentation here. I am not going to rush through these cases, and I'm going to give you the references, the source material, so that you can verify this and investigate these cases on your own. So I'm not going to leave people stranded here. The title of this lecture is called Retrievals of the Third Kind, Cosmic Crashes, Corpses, and Cover-Ups here. And we talked about this a little bit in the beginning here, David. UFO crash retrievals, the ultimate holy grail of UFO research. And why is it the holy grail? It's simple. It's because the UFO crash retrievals contain the debris, the bodies, and the craft. And this is the physical evidence that we've been waiting for 80 years. And it's this physical evidence, if it's brought to the attention of the scientific community as a united coalition, they can, as a third-party independent source of information, they can move forward and bring this out to the public. That's how we're going to have a vehicle toward disclosure here. All right, couple of quick announcements here. Number one, the content of each case highlighted in this presentation has remained intact per the description of the original source. The identity of first-hand sources will be protected per Leonard Stringfield's original agreement with his military contacts. The visual aids used in this presentation are computer-generated forensic composite illustrations and sketches which originated from the specific details provided by Leonard's sources. Sources for the material covered in this presentation included the following. So here's where I got this information, but more importantly, these are the sources, the credible military first-hand sources of where Leonard got this information from. So here's the breakdown. 3-star U.S. Air Force generals, U.S. Air Force fighter pilots, astronauts, commercial pilots, air traffic controllers, neurosurgeons, pathologists, theoretical physicists and mathematicians, U.S. Army officers, U.S. Navy officers, military police, high-level Pentagon officials, top military brass, scientists and engineers who worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and other government facilities. So this is where we're getting our source material from. A couple of quick quotes here. Number one, UFO crash retrievals can't be real because if they were, I would have read about it in the local newspaper. That's first one. Second one, there are not now, nor ever have been any extraterrestrial visitors or equipment on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. This is from their own press release back in 1980. So as we go through these cases, it's going to be our military sources against the United States government saying that there is nothing here. All right, so a little bit of background here. This is the man of the hour. This is Leonard Stringfield. He, over a 30-year time period, started collecting these first-hand military source witness accounts of crash retrievals, bodies, debris, pathologist reports, people who worked on retrieval teams that put craft on 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy trucks and shipped them to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. He's the gentleman who coined the term UFO crash retrieval. So we have to give credit to Leonard Stringfield. A couple of biological points here on his bio here. Leonard Stringfield was born 1920. He grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. By the time he graduated from high school in 1939, he had already memorized the entire dictionary. He joined the military as soon as he heard about the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. After the war, he was employed by a chemical company in Ohio and retired after 30 years. He wrote 2 books, Inside Saucer Post 3-0, that was in 1957, Situation Red, the UFO Siege, 1977, and here's the item we want to focus on tonight. His lecture on UFO crash retrievals at the 1978 MUFON Symposium in Dayton, Ohio, caused an international sensation. Yeah, that's because back in 1978, this whole concept of UFO crash retrievals was a new paradigm at that time. It wasn't brought up. Roswell was just getting into the psyche of UFO research. So back in 1978, it was still a new concept back then. He passed away December 18th, 1994. Okay, newspaper clipping. We're looking at the newspaper clipping here. This is Cincinnati Enquirer, July 19th, 1993. It's got a picture of Leonard on here. It says, "What I've collected has staggering implications for mankind. This would be the biggest thing since Christ, really. Author continues quest for truth about UFOs. And so we've got Leonard here in his office doing his research. I'm going to give him credit. Now, Leonard maintained a collection of 22 bank boxes of original correspondence, letters, drawings, audio tapes, and testimony from his sources. These witnesses should be located and their testimony should be presented before Congress. Yeah, well, it's getting late now, right? Because a lot of this research goes back to the 1940s. These people were already 30, 40, 50 years old at the time. So we are absolutely at the final full stop here. This is the final curtain call on crash retrievals. We've got to land this plane. We've got to move forward and identify these remaining witnesses here. Now, the source material of where I got this information is from this book by Leonard Stringfield, UFO Crash Retrievals, The Complete Investigation, all of his status reports. This is 1978 to 1994. This is a relatively thick book. It's $99. It's on Amazon. I recommend this book to anyone who's interested in these UFO crash retrieval reports. It's report after report of bodies, debris, crashes, dish-shaped craft being loaded, shipped to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, MacDill Air Force Base, Homestead Air Force Base. All of the intricate, detailed information on these crash retrievals that we're going to be talking about tonight is in this book. So that's where I'm referencing the information here. Now, you just had your thing, David, in Vegas. So this kind of checks out here. Would you go to Las Vegas if you knew the odds were 119 to 1 in your favor? You can't lose. So if you had a roulette table that had 120 spaces on it and you bet 119, you're going to win almost every single time. You almost can't lose. So the point I'm making here is that there's 119 crash retrieval cases within the 65 3-ring binders that were at one time at Lunken Airport, where they had all of his original binders. All we need is one to be authentic, and the whole case of UFO crash retrievals not being a reality completely falls apart. All we need is one. So it's going to be, the odds are in our favor. The odds are definitely in our favor here. I want to begin by giving credit to my good friend Rudy Gardea, who did the pencil sketches in this presentation. Now, here's where we're going to start. This is Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, 1946. I want to stress, now what we're looking at here on the screen is a photograph of Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, 1946. It had not become Wright-Patterson Air Force Base until 1947. So we're still prior to Roswell here. The source on this case is a private in records management. In this case, the source came from page 59 of Space, the Final Frontier by Clark McClellan. And this is the cover of the book. It's called Space, the Final Frontier, Secret NASA Doesn't Want You to Know by Clark McClellan. And in this book, and Leonard talks about this as well, they interview this gentleman. And he talks about what he saw at Wright Field back in 1946. And this is the original sketch. So we're looking at his rough pencil sketch here. So he is to deliver an important message to one of the higher military brass at Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, 1946. So he goes in and he notices a friend of his who's an MP. And this MP says, you know what? I got something I want to show you. So he leads them into the hangar. They go to the kind of the back of the hangar, and sitting on the concrete hangar floor is a 15-foot diameter dish-shaped craft. It's 7 feet tall. It has a flat section that's about 1 foot 6 inches wide. It has rectangular shaped windows wrapped around the outer circumference. And this came in from Arkansas on a railroad flat car. So that's how they got it to Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. Now I want to stress that this thing had a polished aluminum chrome exterior. There were no rivets, there were no seams, there were no weld marks, there were no socket head cap screws. There was a central column that went from the bottom of the craft all the way to the top. This thing looked like it was antiseptically sterile inside. So I'm going to move forward.
Right there, I'm going to get you to hold on right there, because we're going to continue with Leonard Stringfield, Michael Schratt, and UFO crash retrievals, an important topic in today's ufology. Spaced Out Radio continues right after this. All right, we are clear. Mike, if you want to, here's what I'm thinking is if you want to keep going for a couple of minutes, because our podcast audience and our YouTube audience can actually hear this, and then when we come back from break, we can continue on.
This case here?
Yeah.
No problem. No problem. All right. So what we're looking at here is my AutoCAD drawing based on the original sketch from the primary witness. And if you look at the dimensions again, it's 15 feet in diameter, it's 7 feet tall. It has a 3-foot diameter central column that runs from the bottom of the floor all the way up to the top. And then if you look very closely here, you'll see that there's a red dot, and that red dot indicates the attempted point of entry that they were using a diamond tip drill bit to get inside this craft. So I've got 2 other cases within my files where these military personnel, these white lab coat technicians, are desperately trying to get inside this craft using diamond tip drill bits. They use acetylene torches. They use lasers. Like anything they can do to get in these craft, they're trying. And in a lot of the cases, they're failing, because these things have a metallurgical science that wasn't known at the time. On the upper right-hand part of this drawing, I've got a cutaway view that shows you the interior. So this thing had no buttons and switches, dials, levers. There was no display screens. There were no seats. This thing could have been unmanned. We don't know for sure. But bottom line is, this is what the craft looked like. Now, so if we go to the next illustration here, this is my first pass on what I put together of what this craft may actually look like. So you've got this chrome aluminum exterior with these windows wrapped around the outer circumference. So I went to Joseph Wraith, my good friend, and he put together this drawing. Very well detailed, very well executed. And I want to stress again that this thing had no rivets, no welds, no seams, no hatches. Came in 1946 by a railroad flat car from Arkansas. On the upper side here, upper right-hand view, you see that he's peeled back the skin, shows you this 3-foot diameter central column, and then like this antiseptically sterile interior of the craft itself. And then if you look in the front view, again, you can see this red dot, which is the indicated point of attempted entry into the craft itself. Now, let's take everything together from the actual sketch of the primary eyewitness, and we'll hook that up with the 3-page report that goes with the case. And I went ahead and had Rudy do a drawing, and this is what we came up with here. So here off to the left, you see the MP. And then on the right-hand side on the floor, just to the bottom of the craft, there was a tarp that was folded up. And then in the foreground, there was a drill, an electric drill with a diamond tip drill bit. And so this is what we came up with, just to give people an idea of what this may have looked like if we were there in the hangar back in 1946. So now we're going to take everything we've put together, the drawing, the sketches, the illustration, the report, and do a final full color rendering so that we can make this thing actually come alive. And this is Joseph Ray's illustration of what it may have looked like if we were there. Now, for all we know, this thing could still be there at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base today, probably in an underground facility. It wasn't that big, so it wouldn't be that difficult to hide this one. So this one may still be there today if we could get access to the facility. All right, next one. Papagos Indian Reservation, west of Globe, Arizona. This is January 1947. So we're already 2 in, and we're still prior to Roswell, July 1947. This is north of Superstition Mountains. The primary source or witness, he served in the U.S. Navy during World War II, and this is page 93, case A10. So what happens here is they're driving down this unimproved area, not too far from Superstition Mountains, and they're challenged by 2 MPs with carbides. And basically they're told, you're not supposed to be here. Well, while they're getting questioned, off to the left, another 150 feet down this unimproved area, they both see this 30-foot diameter dish-shaped craft. It had kind of come in at a 40-degree angle. It was tipped up on the side. It had a dome on top. It was 18 feet high. It had 2 rings wrapped around the outer circumference, and then what like indented sections that were also wrapped around the outer circumference. So we took everything from Rudy's drawing, and the report within Leonard Stringfield's booklet, and we came up with a full color illustration to give people an idea of what this may have looked like if we were there. So we're already
Michael,
tuned.
Hold on right there. I apologize. Thank you tonight to Grant, T-Bone, Pam, Ant-Man, and Steam Train Mark for the super chats. Remember, you can shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. We do not have ugly swag, people. Nothing ugly. And here we go, everyone. Here we go, the second half hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. Good to have you with us as we're talking UFO crash retrievals with Michael Schratt. Reminder to all of you that if you've missed portions of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire. Check out the swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon with the SOR Space Travelers Club. Here we go, Michael Schratt. We are talking about UFO crash retrievals, taking over for the break. This is from the files of Leonard Stringfield. And Michael, thank you for being here with us. Let's get right to it.
No problem. So we'll back review on this one. This is west of Globe, Arizona, 1947. This is before Roswell. And this is the full color illustration of what we're looking at here on the screen, just so people can follow along. This is a 30-foot diameter dish-shaped craft, came down at a 40-degree angle, had a dome on top, 2 rings wrapped around the outer circumference of the craft itself. Now, our 2 witnesses were immediately told to vacate the area, but they got a real good look at this thing before they had to leave. So it's part of the historical narrative of the Leonard Stringfield collection here. All right, next one. White Sands Missile Range, July 4th, 1947. Now we're finally getting into the timeline of Roswell here. The source for this case is a technical sergeant, U.S. Army Air Force, and this is page 196 of Leonard's book, UFO Crash Retrievals. Now this took place at night. I've got the detailed map of White Sands Missile Range here. And this source saw this entire retrieval operation from beginning to end. Now this thing happened at night. Now, when this thing came down, I want to stress that this whole entire operation, and this is a 150-foot diameter dish-shaped craft, it was excruciatingly well lit. So they had light-alls, they had spotlights, they had very powerful beaming spotlights on this craft, illuminating the entire area. They had people with Geiger counters walking around this thing. They had people with still camera photographs. They had motion picture film reel that was taking of this. So this was a very well documented crash retrieval operation. So somewhere in some vault at a Pentagon location, Edwards North Base Complex, the Blue Room at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Eglin Air Force Base, they have absolutely got 8x10 black and white glossy photographs. They have color photographs. They've got motion picture film reels. And that's what we really need to move this field forward. So let's take everything that we got from the original source plus Rudy's drawing. I'm going to hit you with the full color illustration here. Now we're looking at the scene at night in all its glory here. We've got the spotlight shining onto it. We've got the motion picture camera film reels off to the right. We've got still photographer going on. And this is what it may have looked like if we were there back in 1947. This thing's 150 feet in diameter. This is a big craft. And we've got the witnesses are telling us that these things are absolutely going on. They're absolutely happening here. So actionable item here is, since still photography and motion picture film was recorded of this event, senators and congressmen with the appropriate security clearances should track down and utilize this evidence for future public hearings. That's absolutely what should be happening here. But the problem we're running into, Dave, the problem we're running into is that a number of these senators and congressmen, number one, they don't have a need to know. And number two, they don't have a high enough security clearance because they've not been read in on these programs. So they can't declassify anything that they don't have access to. That's the problem we're running into here. All right, next one. UFO crash retrieval in 1947, seen at a warehouse in Berkeley. Okay, Albert Bruce Collins, now deceased, is our source. He was a metallurgical engineer. UFO crash retrievals, page 197 is where I got the information. So he was at the right place at the right time when this 18-wheeler tractor trailer lowboy backs in. I'm going to move to the next photograph here, the next illustration. And this is Rudy's drawing. We're inside the hangar now, and I'm just trying to describe this the best I can. What this gentleman sees, and he's shocked to see this, is this backing into the hangar here, this facility at Berkeley. This is a 30-foot wide egg-shaped craft, 15 feet tall. It had a massive, it looks like an egg that has its shell broken. So there's this breach on the side of the craft with shrapnel coming out of it. There's a massive gash in the side of this egg. And on the forward part, there's this composite panel. In the center of this egg, there's a 3-foot diameter sphere or yolk. You could think of it as the yolk of an egg. Now, wrapped around the outer circumference of this yolk is a composite panel that really matches the form, fit, and function of this 3-foot diameter central sphere. There was also 2 bands that were flat, which were running around the outside portion of it as well. And he's looking at this thing, and he just can't believe what he's seeing here. He did see this whole breach on the lower right-hand side of the craft with this shrapnel coming out of this thing. So absolutely bizarre. So what I want to do now is I want to take the audience to the full color illustration. And this is what we came up by. Joel Christopher Payne had done this. So if we were there back in 1947 at Berkeley, we may have seen something that looks very similar to this craft here. You can see the composite panel in the front.
Right.
You can also see the secondary composite panel that's wrapped around the outer circumference of this interior 3-foot diameter sphere, and also the shrapnel coming out. So my question here is, I want to pose this to the audience. Are we looking at a singular craft, or are we looking at the propulsion system of something that's much larger? If this thing's already 30 feet across, what is this thing powering? Could be much bigger. That's the question I want to find out. All right, so let's continue on here. Fort Polk. We've got, what we're looking at here is the front entry sign of Fort Polk. This is summer 1953. Herman Johnson is the military source. So in a lot of these cases, I've actually got the name of the military source here. He was a private in the Army. This is case A1, page 80. And what he saw, this was from beginning to end now. When this craft came down, this was an egg-shaped craft, 30 feet across, similar to what we just had talked about in the previous case here. When this thing came down, the clay surrounding the crash site, if we want to call it a crash site, was red hot. It was still glowing. It was hot when it got down there. What he described as an egg-shaped craft, 30 feet across. It had a kind of like a fin that was still rotating around the craft itself. Now, there were 4 bodies that were recovered. 1 came out on a stretcher that was going toward an ambulance truck. 3 others were, quote unquote, assisted by military medical personnel. They were about 3.5 to 4 feet tall. They had oversized head, oversized eyes, slit for a mouth, minute nose. They were wearing a one-piece tight-fitting flight suit. They had a helmet on with a clear, transparent visor. Dave, they had what looked like mittens on, and they had no knee joint. So they could only move their legs by their hips. So there was this staggered stepping motion that they were using. Now, it appeared that some of the group of 3 were trying to communicate to their comrade that was on the stretcher heading toward the ambulance truck. That was mentioned in this report. So what I want to do now is take everything we got together from the eyewitness report, the military source, and Rudy's drawing, and we're going to go to the next slide here, which is the full color rendering of what this may have looked like. So you've got this 30-foot long egg-shaped craft. You've got the fin here. We've got the burning embers where this thing came down. We've got the military vehicles off to the right, the ambulance truck. And now I want to move in a little bit closer here. Now you can see these 3 ETs exiting the craft with the military medical personnel assisting them. Again, 3.5 feet tall, one-piece tight-fitting flight suit. It appeared they were wearing mittens and they had no knee joint. All right, moving on to the next one here. Now we're zooming in. We can see the single ET being loaded into the ambulance truck. And again, it had this red dirt colored section where this craft actually came down. And the other three are just beginning to come out now. And I want to go to the next slide. We'll describe this in greater detail now. This is the singular ET on his way blow up to the ambulance truck. And this is all coming from our military witnesses that are describing these UFO crash retrieval operations that they had firsthand knowledge of. And so this isn't like secondhand, third-hand, dead man's testimony. This is coming from firsthand military sources. All right, next one. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, 1953. I really love this case. Michael Olvey is the name of the source. He was an Army Reserves warrant officer at the time. And what we're looking at here is a photograph of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. This is UFO crash retrievals, page 15, abstract number 8. So this is at nighttime. He's at the right place at the right time. And I believe it took place in this hangar complex number 4. I don't know if that's a fact, but I'm venturing to guess that it took place in this hangar complex. May actually have been in this hangar right here. This is Bay E. I've actually been inside this hangar. So a 4-engine DC-7 cargo plane lands at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. It taxis up into the hangar. As soon as it taxis into the hangar doors shut closed. So what you've got here is a picture of a DC-7. Now, I've just shown this to give people an idea of what this looked like. Now, picture this scene inside the hangar now. There is an aft port cargo bay door that opens up, and then the forklift comes over and starts offloading these wooden crates. And on the top of this crate, this pallet, there's 3 wooden crates with the lids tipped off. So what I want to do now, take the audience inside this hangar, and this warrant officer is looking at the inside of these 3 crates that had the lids taken off. And you can see this military personnel off to the upper left here. He's kind of like guiding the retrieval operation. So this warrant officer looks inside and he sees 3 ET bodies. They were all deceased. They were 3.5 feet tall, basically oversized head, oversized eyes, slit for a mouth, minute nose. One was female because he said one had breasts. And he also said that all 3 were being suspended off the bottom of these wooden crates by a netting that protected it from the dry ice freezer burn below. This is according to the warrant officer. He also saw boxes being offloaded from this DC-7, which were directly associated with the debris that they recovered from this retrieval operation. So here is Joseph Ray's full color rendering of what this may have looked like if we were actually there. So if we could track down this witness, if he's still alive, he may be able to testify at Congress in Washington, D.C. and talk about the bodies, the debris, where it went, where it was stored, where the bodies are, where the craft is, where is all of the remaining debris associated with the craft. These are the kind of witnesses that we need to come forward. And again, as we mentioned before, this is the final curtain call on UFO crash retrievals. Now, here's his look down inside these wooden crates. And he absolutely mentioned that one of these beings was female. He knew that right away. Now we'll go to the next case here. This is Walker Air Force Base, New Mexico, April 12, 1954. Primary source, served in the Air Force. This is 54 to 55. And this is UFO crash retrievals, page 82. Now, I want to state up front, Walker Air Force Base was at one time Roswell Army Airfield 509th Bomb Group. So we're talking about the same military facility here that used to be Roswell Army Airfield back in 1947. So in this case, this military personnel, he is told to board an H-19 helicopter. So he goes in this H-19 helicopter. This is at night. They take off. They start heading northbound. They make a left-hand turn. Now they're around the Corona area where the original event took place back in 1947. So it's at night. I'm going to go to the drawing here. Off to the right-hand side, he opens up this, entry cargo bay door on the helicopter. He's looking down. There's a spotlight shining on the scene, and he's taking photographs of this 50-foot diameter dish-shaped craft that came in at about a 40-degree angle. There was a dome on top. There was a series of lights going around the outer circumference rim of the craft itself. They were in different colors. They were still rotating when he was hovering over the craft itself. Now, I want to mention that they discovered 4 ET bodies outside the craft, all dead. When they got inside the entryway hatchway that you can see in Rudy's drawing, they found an additional 2 bodies. So there were 6 ET bodies recovered. Eventually, the helicopter landed very close to the craft itself. And according to the primary eyewitness, the very first thing that he noticed when he got to the location where this craft was is that he said that the entire vicinity smelled like automobile battery acid. So I thought, boy, that's interesting. We've heard a little bit about that in other cases as well, but that's absolutely the first thing he noticed, that the whole place reeked of this automobile battery acid smell. All right, so now we're going to go to the full color rendering, and what we're looking at now is a illustration showing you this H-19 helicopter with the military personnel. He's kind of in the entryway doorway looking down on this crash retrieval scene. By this time, military M6x6 troop transport jeeps had arrived on the scene, and he saw this entire operation. And there's about a 3-page report describing this case in great detail in Leonard's book. All right, next one. Very good case. This is December 1963, Cherry Point, North Carolina, U.S. Marine. His name is Roy Baker. So we have his name. This is not an anonymous source. We've actually got the guy's name. This is UFO Crash Retrievals, page 152, case 2. So he's at this Marine base, Cherry Point, North Carolina. Now I'm showing a photograph of the map that gives you an idea where this actually is. It's just north of Havelock. So he is basically told to board a plane with blacked out windows, and they fly 3 hours by Cherry Point, North Carolina to an undisclosed location. He gets out of this plane with these blacked out windows. He walks up to this facility, and these hangar doors open up, and what he sees is this craft right here. This is a drawing I put together based on his original sketches and testimony. And what we're looking at here is a drawing of a 40-foot diameter dish-shaped craft. It's 15 feet tall. It looks like a fat hamburger. It has a chrome-polished aluminum exterior. There are no seams. There are no rivets. There are no socket head cap screws. There are essentially 9 opaque elliptically shaped windows wrapped around the outer circumference of the craft itself that you really couldn't look into because they were really opaque. Now, he did say that there was this slightest hint of a seam that was so fully integrated into the craft you couldn't put a razor blade in there. It was almost like a liquefied seam that melded into the metallurgy of the skin itself. That's how fully integrated the seam was. Now, he did mention that in this facility, there were teams of lab coat technicians that were trying to breach this craft, and they were using a diamond tip drill bit, just like we talked about in the beginning of this presentation, 1946 at Wright Field. They were doing the same thing here with this diamond tip drill bit. So now I'm going to go to the next slide here, and you can see these red dots are the attempted points of entry with this diamond tip drill bit. Here is Joseph Ray's full color rendering, and you can get an idea of how polished chrome aluminum this thing actually looks. I mean, if you can imagine being there at the time. This is just after Kennedy was assassinated November 22nd, 1963. Here is this craft at this facility, 40 feet across, 15 feet high. And these windows had a 1-inch lip between the outer exterior of the skin of the craft itself and the outer exterior of the opaque windows. There was this 1-inch lip that you could feel with your thumb and your fingers. That's something that he talked about multiple times in this report. Now, here are the 3 ways they tried to get in. So off to the left in this slide here, I've got a picture of these diamond tip drill bits. In the center, I've got an acetylene torch. And on the right, they were using a laser. So these are the three ways that they tried to breach the hull of the craft itself. Now, what we're looking at now is an actual sketch from Roy Baker, who was the U.S. Marine, who was at this facility for 2 weeks, and his job was to guard this facility and this craft for a period of 2 weeks. And this is all back in December 1963. So in this rough sketch, if you look on the upper left and upper right-hand corner,
yes,
you've got these lights here. So this is excruciatingly well lit. We're talking about no shadows in this facility. Now, he also mentioned that this entire craft was propped up off the hangar floor on scaffolding. They had a catwalk where you could walk around this thing. You could walk under this. And you can see here, he's got like a black mark on one of these windows where they were trying to use the diamond tip drill bit. And then if you look under this craft, you've got these black marks here. These are the pads that were used to support this craft on the scaffolding. So let's go to the next drawing here. Here is a drawing by Michael Johnstone, who interviewed Roy Baker back in 1986. He was living in Culver City, California at the time. This is his slightly more detailed drawing. And now if you look to the left of this drawing, where the seam of the craft itself, or like the exterior of the craft, meets up with the opaque window, there's this little lip there. That's what this gentleman described. There was a definitive lip associated with the windows and the exterior skin of this craft itself. Now let's go to the detailed drawing. This is my detailed drawing put together from Michael Johnstone's drawing, a little bit more refined here. And if you look off to the left, I've done an enlarged view showing you this 1-inch lip. So again, 40 feet diameter, looks like a fat hamburger. We've got these opaque windows wrapped around the outer circumference here. And we'll just go over a couple of these bullet items here. Craft was seen at an undisclosed military location 3 hours by plane from Cherry Point, North Carolina. Number 2, the entire craft was surrounded with what looked like standard military aircraft scaffolding. Number 3, a white circle was taped to the floor, which outlined the prohibited area for Air Force generals. So in other words, his job was to guard this thing and shoot to kill anyone who challenged to breach this circle that was painted and taped off just below this craft itself. I mean, we're talking about shoot to kill here. Between 3 to 4 U.S. Marines guarded the craft while it was temporarily in the hangar. Next one. The windows of the craft were indented toward the interior, forming a 1-inch lip. That's what we have in the detailed view. The primary eyewitness secretly took a photograph of the saucer, which was later lost in the flood. We'll talk about that a little bit later here. A team of between 20 to 50 engineers examined the craft, but were unable to gain access to the interior. So by the time this case wrapped up, we don't even know if they ever got inside. He wasn't briefed on it. He didn't know if they ever got inside. So here is Joseph's full color rendering of what this may have looked like. Got to give credit to Joseph for kind of making this case come alive here. And that's what we want to do with these illustrations. We don't want to just see, boring text. We want to actually be there as close as we can, as if we were actually there. This was the first pass illustration by John McNeil. And you can see here, after they failed with the diamond tip drill bit and they failed with the acetylene torch, they brought in 2 18-wheeler tractor trailer lowboy trucks that had these very powerful electrical generators on them. And there was 2 heavy gauge cables that led from the tractor trailers inside this hangar that were connected to a laser device. And they were shining the laser on the exterior skin. And when they moved the laser away, it was warm to the touch, but made no damage to the exterior itself. So you can see why the military industrial complex, the defense contractors, would be very interested in this type of metallurgical science, because if you could build an aircraft made out of this material, you would rule the skies. You would have an advantage. Absolutely.
Michael Schratt, we have him for another hour on Spaced Out Radio. He's one of the best when it comes to aviation and UFO crash retrieval history. We continue with this educational show right after this on Spaced Out Radio. Stay tuned, everybody. Michael, do you want to keep going, or do you want to take a break?
Keep going. We can keep going. Right. We can keep going. So now what I want to do.
Okay, we got about 5.5 minutes. Okay,
we got 5.5 minutes. No problem. What I want to do is I want to take the audience through a visual tour of this facility, like we are a fly on the wall, but we're going to penetrate this restricted area and get inside access to this facility. All right. So here is slide number 1. This is back in 1963, December 1963, at an undisclosed location. We're going to go through the chain link fence. We made it through the chain link fence. Now we're getting a little bit closer. So what we're looking at now is the interior hangar view from about 200 feet in front of the hangar. We're going to be zooming in. We're going to do a 45-degree look down view of the hangar itself. Get a little bit closer. Now we're on the inside. You can see this circle that's been kind of taped off on the floor. We've got the lab coat technicians, very well, excruciatingly well lit. You've got the scaffolding. You've got military personnel. You've got the lab coat technicians. He did say that there were suitors there, so there were CIA types. They're probably monitoring all of this while this is going on here. And you could think, wow, what would it be like if we were actually there? And where is this craft now is a big question here. All right, so now if you look very closely, you can begin to see this 1-inch lip that was associated with the opaque windows on this craft. And again, we've got these lab coat technicians, we've got the military personnel, and these CIA types that are around this whole operation here. Now, if you look here, we can faintly see the seams of the bottom hatchway and how they destroyed these diamond tip drill bits. And then this 1-inch lip is definitely coming into view here on the exterior skin of the craft itself. Here's the 45-degree look down view. This is a real good view of what it may have looked like if we were there. The circle taped off on the ground is very much in view now. Now, there was one case, we'll talk about it here. A U.S. Secretary of the Navy just about got shot for going over this circle. He didn't do it, but he got within a few seconds of it. He would have been shot completely. And if you look very closely here, you can kind of see the pads that support the bottom of the craft itself. And this military police, this Marine, he described how this thing was propped up. They had a catwalk. You could walk around this thing. So this is the closest we could get to what it may actually have looked like. Now, on the last day that he was there, he said he was there for 2 weeks. The last day he was there, he said that this thing had already moved off of its scaffolding. They built a cradle on the back end of a trailer, and they were lowering this thing onto a cradle, and they were putting tarps over it. And then on top of the tarps, they were putting heavy chains and getting ready to move it to the next location. So here we have the loading operation. Now you see this chassis and cradle that they're creating. And we're going to go to the next slide here. And what we're looking at now is the slide depicting the final degree of the tarp operation, covering this craft up, getting ready to move it to the next location. So it's very clear. One of the ways that they keep all of this under wraps to the scientific community, to the general public, people all around the world, is number one, they compartmentalize all this. There's no one person that knows the whole story. We've got a lot of people who know fragments of the story, but nobody knows the full story. Or if they did, it's a very small group. Number two, they move these assets from location to location. So at one time, it might be at MacDill Air Force Base. Then they'll move it to Homestead Air Force Base. Then they'll move it to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So you can see they take these assets and they diversify their portfolio. All right, now we're fully tarped. That's what we're looking at now. This is an illustration showing you what this thing may have looked like as it was fully tarped. And now we're getting ready to move to the next location, wherever that is, wherever that may be. This is Rudy's drawing of what this tarping operation may have looked like. So this is kind of the first pass drawing by Rudy. And then I want to talk about this interesting incident that Roy Baker describes, U.S. Marine Roy Baker, back in 1963. He said that when they had this laser and they pointed this laser onto the side exterior skin of the craft. It bounced off, reflected, and damaged the ceiling tile. That's what he said. And I thought, that's really interesting. So I was able to procure an original sketch from the Marine that demonstrates this and illustrates this. So you can see this damage on the ceiling tile here in this drawing by Joseph Wraith. Here is the original sketch from the Marine that depicts this incident. So you've got the craft on the scaffolding, you've got personnel there, and you can see X marks the spot where they had this damage to the ceiling tile. Now, he also mentioned that the lab coat technicians were using color-coded badges. So if you had a green badge, you could go here inside the facility. If you had a yellow badge, you had access to this part of the facility. If you had a red badge, you had full access to the entire facility. So there was a multi-color coded badge operation going on within this facility here. Now, there was one time that he was alone with this craft because his job was to frisk anyone who entered the facility. But on one occasion and one occasion only, nobody frisked him. So he got alone with this craft. And I've got his direct quote here. He says, someday I will. Yep, go ahead.
A big thank you tonight to Charles, T-Bone ×2, Mennonite Abe, Maureen, Mark, Grant, Pam, and Ant-Man for the super chats. Here comes hour 2.
Okay.
You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show.
Here we go with hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio tonight. UFO crash retrievals with Michael Schratt continues as we say hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on Odyssey Radio, TalkStream Live, and KPNL. All of our archives are free. Join us at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Hecatome. Hecatome is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and you can join us on Patreon in the SOR Space Travelers Club. We continue with this pertinent information about UFO crash retrievals. Michael Schratt is with us, a UFO historian, aviation historian, and researcher. Michael, thank you for the education lesson tonight.
Glad to be with you. Glad to be with you. We'll pick up where we left off here. Now, this is a direct quote by this U.S. Marine back in December 1963 when he was guarding this craft. He was left alone one time only, and he said here, quote, "Someday I will tell this story, and by God, people are going to believe me." So he actually took a Minox camera out of his pocket, snapped a photograph, and back in 1983, that photograph was lost in a flood. So we were this close of getting some really good evidence that these retrieval operations are actually going on. We were this close, and then it got snatched from us. And that's always seems to be the case with these stories here, with these accounts. So this is Joseph Wraith's reproduction, the best we could put together of what that Minox camera photograph may have looked like. So kind of a gray tone, blurry, grainy, something that may have looked like that. If we could just get this photograph, it would help our cause to really not only preserve an important part of our national history, but bring these cases out into the light here. All right, now this is Paul Nitz, United States Secretary of the Navy between November 29th, 1963 to June 30th, 1967. This fits the timeline of when this gentleman said that he was at this facility December 1963. This would have been the Secretary of the Navy that was just about killed walking over this tape section on the floor. He would definitely know about this. Someone to track down. I don't know if he's deceased now, but someone that needs to be further investigated. Now, that brings us to a photograph of 4-star Major General Melvin F. McNichol. We're looking at this photograph here. He was base commander at Tinker Air Force Base, Oklahoma. Why is he important in this story? Well, here is the Daily Oklahoma. This is the obituary. This is from July 11th, 1986. It says, ex-Tinker Commander Melvin McNichol dies. All right. Now, again, why is he important? Because he was friends with a woman named Charlotte Mann. She plays a role in the 1941 Cape Girardeau UFO crash retrieval operation. These two were friends, very good friends, for years. And she had a interesting passion for UFOs, and so did Melvin F. McNichol. And so Charlotte Mann turns over to the general and says, you know what? We've been friends for years. We have this coincident type interest in UFOs. And General, you've never told me anything about UFOs. You've never mentioned a word. Are you still my friend? Is there something you could tell me? And this general turns to Charlotte Mann in a very serious tone and says, Charlotte, if you ever repeat what I'm about to tell you, I'll deny it, and it could ruin my career. And he goes on to tell her 3 things. Number 1, he told her that he saw a UFO which was located in the West. That checks out with what the Marine said, because he said he boarded a plane from Cherry Point, North Carolina, and by 3 hours by plane would put you in the West, within the West. Number 2, he said he walked around a UFO that was on a catwalk, which was propped up by scaffolding. This is identical to what the Marine had talked about, scaffolding and a catwalk. And then he said, this is Melvin McNichol talking to Charlotte Mann. He said, bodies were recovered and one was still alive. The U.S. Marine, Roy Baker, at this facility, overheard water cooler talk by the white lab coat technicians talking about bodies were recovered and one was still alive. So when I heard Charlotte Mann talk about what Melvin McNichol told her, I said, I got it. I knew I had a real case when I heard this, because I knew that Charlotte Mann did not know Roy Baker. I'm sure of it. I'm sure completely 2 different people did not run into each other. So I had second independent confirmation from Charlotte Mann, and then also from what we're hearing from this Melvin McNichol. Now I knew I had a real case, so I could bank on it. Next one, Fort Riley. This is December 10th, 1964. The source is 1st Infantry Division, Erin, Quebec. UFO crash retrievals, page 24, abstract 20. What we're looking at here is Fort Riley greeting sign here as you get into the facility by Leonard Stringfield. Here's the map of where this thing actually came down. This is map of Camp Forsyth, which indicates the general location of where this came down. So our military source, he is joined by 2 others. They're told to go into a 6x6 troop transport. They go into this clearing. This is at night. They walk about a half mile into this clearing. And what do they see? They see this craft. This is all at night. It's 48 feet in diameter, 18 feet tall. It has a series of square-shaped sections that are jutting out about 10 inches from the outer circumference of the craft itself. There's a fin section at the back end of this, and directly below this fin section is what looked like an exhaust port. I'm going to do another detailed SolidWorks drawing that gives you an idea of what we're looking at here. You can see these square sections jutting out, and then what looks like a fin and an exhaust port just above this section with the square indentations that are jutting out. Here is Rudy's drawing of what this may have looked like at night. They had one Huey UH-1 Bell helicopter hovering over the scene. It was actually crisscrossing the area until it found the craft. And then our source indicated that there were multiple teams of hazmat suit material personnel that had Geiger counters that were walking around this thing, and he had to guard this craft overnight. So you can imagine what he was thinking. Now, David Marler, he was able to procure a 15-minute audio tape interview with the military source. So not only do we have his testimony, we have his original drawing, and we have an audio tape interview that discusses this case in great detail. Now, let's go to Joseph's full-color rendering of what this actually may have looked like if we were there. So there were actually CIA types there. You can see the craft tipped up at a 40-degree angle. You can see the fin, also this exhaust port, and then the Bell helicopter hovering over the scene with a spotlight. Let's go to a little bit different view here. Now you're looking at a more of a, I could say we're about 10 degrees looking down on the craft itself, almost at eye level, but not quite. But this Bell helicopter is coming into view a little bit better. And then off to the right, you've got the military personnel. So this is back in 1964. Now, I wouldn't bring this case up because it's a controversial case to say the least, if it wasn't for the fact that there was a secondary independent source unknown to Aaron Quebec, who's the primary eyewitness. They didn't even know each other. A secondary source stated that he saw, after this actually took place, an M123 tank transporter with a disc-shaped craft described identical to what the primary eyewitness had described. It was covered with a tarp. It was going up kind of a hilly curved road. It had chains covered over the tarp section of the craft itself. And there were hazmat personnel with biological hazmat suits walking around this hangar. And he was challenged and told to vacate the area immediately. He saw it for about 60 seconds and was told to get out of the area immediately. This is what the hazmat suits looked like as they were walking around the craft. So we have the original source, and we have a secondary independent source who absolutely confirmed that this was an actual retrieval operation. All right, next one.
Wow.
What you're looking at now is a photograph of the Air Force Museum, Dayton, Ohio. This event took place in 1965 at the museum, and this is UFO Crash Retrievals, page 93, case A11. So if anyone wants to follow with Leonard's book, that's the page number, 93, case A11. And this actually took place inside the museum. I'm going to go to the next slide here. And what we're looking at now is a photograph of the V2 rocket display inside the Air Force Museum. And this is back in 1965. And you today, tomorrow, can go to this exact V2 rocket. It's the same one that we're talking about in this case, the very same rocket display. So there's a couple that are just admiring this rocket display, and they're looking at this, and all of a sudden the husband leaves his wife, completely leaves her stranded over at this V2 rocket display. He wanders off to the side of the museum, and he's wandering the back hallways of the Air Force Museum. He goes through a double doorway that's marked restricted, do not enter. He kind of busts through this double doorway, and he is met with the absolute shock of his life, and he sees this. It was a 3.5 foot tall ET, humanoid looking being, approximately 3.5 feet tall. It was wearing a wrinkled Mercury shiny spacesuit, something that our original Mercury 7 astronauts would wear. Oversized head, oversized eyes, slit furrow mouth, minute nose. It had a helmet on top. This ET being, or whatever it was, appeared to have escaped from its underground containment near the military side of the base and had wandered through an underground tunnel, we believe, and got into the back halls of the Air Force Museum. Within 5 seconds of this gentleman, who's our primary witness, encountering this being, all the buzzers and lights in the Air Force Museum started going off. And if you look on this lower right-hand drawing, detailed drawing that Rudy has done here, you can see that the military police are ushering these people out of the Air Force Museum in direct result of this breach here, of this security breach. So apparently this thing escaped from an underground facility, made it through an underground tunnel, and wound up wandering the back halls of the Air Force Museum, believe it or not. Next one, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, 1966. What I'm showing here is the front gate 18. This is actually 1B. Page 17, case abstract number 13 is the page number and abstract number. So this was a contractor. He worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base back in 1966. He was a civil service electrician. So when he got home the night after work, he was wearing a trench coat, and he came over to his son, and he had kind of a grin on his face, and he says, "You know what? I got something I want to show you. So he reached inside his breast pocket. He brings out an 8x10 black and white glossy photograph of a southwestern scene. In the background, there were some cacti and everything. So we know it was in the Southwest, New Mexico, Arizona, something like that. Off to the left, there was a white lab coat technician. Off to the right was a military personnel who had khakis on and boots on, and they were holding a dead ET corpse that was wearing a one-piece tight-fitting flight suit by its wrists off the ground. And his son is absolutely shocked by what he's seeing. He can't believe what this is actually depicting here. Now, this particular case has a hostile ending because the next morning, when the primary source returned to work, they noticed that that photograph was missing, and they tracked it down to him being the person who took it the night before. He was fired on the spot. So this is one of these cases that did not end well for the primary eyewitness. So again, here's another example of they've got photographs, they've got debris, they've got bodies, they've got retrievals, they've got the physical evidence, but that physical evidence is not being handed to not only our senators and congressmen in Washington, D.C., but the scientific community as a whole. All right, next one, Southwest, July 3rd, 1967, Marine rank private first class. This is Crash Retrievals, page 86, case A5. Now, this primary eyewitness, who is this Marine, what he's told to do is guard a prefabricated Quonset-style hangar/building. So he's there for about 3 days. He's guarding this whole area, and curiosity got the best of him. This is from the report here. So he walks over to this prefabricated hangar building. It has kind of these tarp flaps that he opens up and looks inside. And when he looked inside, he saw, and this is Rudy's drawing here, a 30-foot diameter dish-shaped craft. It had a dome on top. In the foreground of this drawing here, he said that there were multiple workstation tables, and on the tables there were micrometers, there were calipers, there was like industrial type instruments there. Off to the right, there was a walk-in freezer with body bags. Now, he didn't say that he saw any bodies, but he did see the body bags. So here's another case where they've got craft and perhaps bodies associated with this retrieval operation back in the Southwest, July 3rd, 1967, according to this Marine. Now, let's go to the full color illustration here by Joel Christopher Payne. Want to give him credit for the work. In the foreground, you can see these workstation tables. We've got white lab coat technicians. You've got some boxes off to the right. And then in the center of this illustration, we've got this seamless craft with a dome on top. Off to the right, we've got the walk-in freezer and then these body bags. So when you start stacking up these cases, you start seeing this pattern, this repeating pattern that's kind of woven through a lot of these cases. You hear these body reports, these retrieval operations, craft being completely seamless. I mean, there's no rivets on these things. There's no fasteners. There's no weld marks. These look like they're built on the atomic level, atom by atom, or like built on a 3D printer, but on a huge, grand, full-scale level. That's what we're seeing. That's what these military sources are telling us here. All right, next one. Fort Hood, Texas. Late 1960s. This is a private pilot. This is UFO Crash Retrievals, page 91. So within Fort Hood, Texas, is something called Robert Gray Army Airfield. Now, this is, it says late 1960s, so I'm thinking probably around 1968. And here's a photograph. This is a top view looking down aerial photograph of Robert Gray Army Airfield. That's the location of where this actually took place. So this 172 pilot back in 1968, he has to make an emergency landing at an unimproved runway at Robert Gray Army Airfield. So you can picture the sight scene here. You've got a 172 pilot. He makes this landing, and we'll go to the Rudy's drawing here. And within 30 seconds of him landing, this is all in the report, he said that there was a Jeep that pulled up, and there were military personnel. They both had 45 caliber pistols that were pointed at the primary eyewitness. And that's what you can see in the upper left-hand part of this drawing here. So he's out of the 172. He's got his hands up. Now, while all this is going on, there is a absolutely massive bypass door that opens up. It's about 400 feet wide, 400 feet long. And you would never know that there's anything here because this bypass door on the top surface had landscape that blended in with the surrounding area. So you had like very low shrubbery, you've got dirt, you've got some rocks there. It completely blends in with the background. What he was seeing was the entryway to a massive underground facility that contained a runway. So you could land a C-130 in this facility. He also mentioned that off to the right, he saw what looked like Cray computer banks. He also mentioned that there were robotic droids going back and forth, monitoring this area. And we've got multiple reports of military helicopters escorting UFOs coming from this facility. So this appears to be a staging area for man-made UFOs that are being test flown and escorted by double rotor CH-47 Chinook helicopters. And so that's what you see here in Rudy's drawing. We've also got Eddie Laxon's craft from 1966, and then later on, Cash Landrum that happened December 29th, 1980 craft. That's also here. All right, so here is the question I'm posing. Is there a vast top secret underground facility located at Gray Army Airfield? The witnesses are telling us, yes, there absolutely is. Now, on page 100 of Leonard's book, Tommy Blonde interviews somebody called Colonel X, and I want to talk about two quick statements that he talked about here. Number one, the colonel stated that underground installations, as well as isolated areas of military reservations, have squadrons of unmarked helicopters which have sophisticated instrumentation on board that are dispatched to areas of UFO activity to monitor these craft or airlift them out of the area if one has malfunctioned. Yeah, like in Cash Landrum incident. Next one, quote, this is from the colonel here. The technology that is being applied in this underground complex would remind someone of a science fiction thriller. It is unbelievable what they know and can do from this area. Isn't that interesting? I wonder what they can do from this area here. These are the helicopters that witnesses are reporting, escorting these UFOs. Most likely are man-made ARV type craft. All right, next one. Now what we're looking at here is a full color illustration by John McNeil. And this represents the Cash Landrum incident. This is around 9 p.m. at night, December 29th, 1980, Huffman, Texas. So we've got Betty Cash as the driver. We've got Vicki Landrum. We've got Colby Landrum. They're all driving south on 1485. They're west of Dayton, Texas. They were looking for two bingo halls, and both of them were closed at the time. So they said, you know what? We're just going to drive Vicki home, and we're done for the night. So they're heading southbound, and all of a sudden, Colby Landrum, who's sitting in the back seat of the car, looks off to the right, and he sees this white light approaching. And as it gets bigger, whatever this thing was parked itself 150 feet in front of Betty Cash's car. She slams on the brakes. Vicki Landrum lunges forward and puts her hands on the dashboard and actually imprints and melts her fingertips onto the dashboard part of the craft itself of the vehicle. Now, while all this is going on, it's very clear that this is a large craft. It's 90 feet tall. It's as big as a water tower. It's illuminating the entire area. It looks like two ice cream cones put together with the wide ends connecting each other. There was a flat section where the wide ends of these ice cream cones met, and it had what looked like porthole windows. This is something that John Schuessler had talked about. Now, every time this craft would bob down, and this is only 150 feet near Betty's car, there was a blue-colored flame that was roaring out the bottom of this craft itself. And every time that flame came out, this craft would bob back up again. This repeated itself. Betty was looking at this craft for about 3 minutes, and there was a proximity indicator going on within this craft itself. So not only did you have this roaring noise, but there was a beeping noise as well.
Michael Schratt on Spaced Out Radio. We have until the top of the hour talking UFO crash retrievals. He's the best at what he does. We're glad he's here for your entertainment on the mighty SOR. We'll be right back right after this. These are so incredible, Michael.
Huh.
Do you need a break or do you want to continue?
Oh, no, we can keep on going.
Let's go, buddy. Let's go.
Problem. We'll keep going. All right, so we've got Betty Cash looking at this thing for at least 3 to 5 minutes, and Colby Landrum and Vicki Landrum are outside the vehicle. So Colby is between the vehicle and Vicki Landrum, and they're absolutely shocked at what they're seeing. I mean, it's a very loud roaring noise. Now, by this time, Vicki and Colby go back into the car. Betty starts walking back toward the driver's side door. She reaches her hand onto the metal latch of the door, and she burns her hand. She actually has to use the portion of her leather jacket to kind of give it a little bit of insulation so she can open up the door. Remember, this is back December 29th, 1980. It's cold outside. When they get back inside the vehicle, it is so burning hot, they have to turn on the air conditioner. Now, this craft moves off to the left, and I've got the detailed map of where actually this all takes place. A few minutes later, no less than 23 double-rotor Chinook CH-47 helicopters go after this craft. There were 2 Bell UH-1 helicopters and 1 Sikorsky Sky Crane that were attempting to retrieve this craft, assist this craft, escort this craft, but there were absolutely military helicopters associated with this whole operation. Now, let's go to the next slide here. This is the Clarion Ledger newspaper clipping, December 25th, 1983. On the bottom, you've got Betty Cash, you've got Colby Landrum, you've got Vicki Landrum, and then off to the right on the bottom, you've got Principal Investigator John Schuessler. Now, what I'm showing here in this newspaper clipping is if you look at this road, something very interesting happened within this case. Within minutes of the helicopters departing the area and then Betty Cash is driving back to drop off Vicki Landrum, all 3 of them immediately starting exhibiting the case and the effects and symptoms of radiation poisoning. Absolutely. So what it appears that happened is whatever this craft was had a hull breach on the inside, and fissionable material inside the reactor started spewing out and got all 3 of them sick. Now, in this newspaper clipping, we've got this photograph of this road here. What did 3 Texans encounter? A sighting of UFO brought illness, but few answers. According to John Schuessler, after this happened, the Army Corps of Engineers came over and dug up the road and they repaved it because there was a big black burnt mark, like physical evidence there. They repaved over the road. And then according to John Schuessler, 2 weeks later, they came back and they did it again. They did it a second time. They repaved it a second time. And do you have any idea what the Air Force did regarding Betty's car, David? Any idea?
Didn't they confiscate it or destroy it?
Well, they tried to buy Betty Cash's car. I thought that's very interesting. If there's nothing to this case, why would the Army Corps of Engineers want to repave the road twice? And why would the Air Force want to buy Betty's car if there's nothing to this? Now, they really didn't get their day in court, but maybe we'll talk about that later. All right, next one. Here is Florida Today, December 4th, 1983. Site of incident, path of UFO. This map shows you where this actually took place. So this is one of the top 3 cases within ufology. Absolutely. All right, here is the full color rendering that Joel Payne put together because there were independent eyewitnesses that said that there were large 4-engine C-130 cargo planes landing at this underground facility. So they have a runway here. You could land F-16s here at Gray Army Airfield, which is embedded within Fort Hood, Texas. All right, next one. California City, summer 1971. Sources Debbie Clayton. This is page 233 of the book. She was at the right place at the right time when there was a large explosion in her California City neighborhood. It was not too big at the time. So there were additionally at least 3 to 4 other eyewitnesses that got out of their dwelling place. They walked over where this craft came down, and what they saw was a mushroom top, kind of a dish-shaped craft. It was 10 feet wide. It was 5 feet tall. Within 5 minutes of them getting there, and the primary eyewitness had a camera, he was taking photographs of this whole thing. The military arrived on the scene. There was a general ordering them to depart the area immediately. They walked about another 1/8 mile down the road, but they were still watching this whole thing.
Michael, hold on. We got 10 seconds.
Go ahead.
Big thank you to T-Bone for the hat trick. Charles, Maureen, Mennonite Abe, Mark, Grant, Pam, and Ant-Man. Here we go. We passed the halfway point of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Very much appreciate earning your listening ears. We're going to continue on with UFO crash retrievals with Michael Schratt in a moment. But first, reminder to all of you that all of our shows, our archives, they're for free at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. The only thing I want in return, hit that subscribe button. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the newswire, check out our swag. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and you can join us on Patreon, the SOR Space Travelers Club. Here we go with Michael Schratt, Crash Retrieval History. We are getting schooled tonight, Michael. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here. Great to be here. Okay, so wrapping up this case, when the military arrived on scene, there was one military vehicle that had a crane attached to the trailer, and that crane had a lanyard that picked up the craft, put it on the back of the trailer, and we believe was shipped to Edwards Air Force Base North Base Complex, and this is back in 1971. So they absolutely, most likely have a craft there, or it could have moved to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base after this event actually took place. All right, next one. Norton Air Force Base, 1973. This was an Air Force photographer. Page 160, case 14 is where you can get the information and read about this case. Now, when he was a photographer, he was based at Hawaii at the time, back in 1973. He got his security clearance upgraded, and he was flown from Hawaii to Norton Air Force Base, where he joined another Air Force photographer. So now we've got 2 Air Force photographers. They go inside this Air Force vehicle. They drive an hour from Norton Air Force Base, and then all of a sudden, that vehicle stops, and it's lowered into a vast underground facility. And I'm going to take you to the next drawing here. And what you see here is Rudy's drawing depicting what we're going to describe here. These 2 gentlemen, once they get out of this vehicle in this underground facility, they're told to go into another room and disrobe completely nude and go into these white medical smocks that cover their upper part of their forehead and their face. So now they've got these medical smocks, and they're told to go inside a 30-foot diameter dish-shaped craft that's being propped up by a crane device. There's a little bit of an entryway hatchway, and there's a netting that supports this craft on a lanyard connected to the cable that's connected to the crane. So on a cherry picker, they go inside the hatch of this 30-foot diameter dish-shaped craft. And I'm going to give you the exact quote of what this photographer said it looked like when he got inside. This is his exact quote. He says, quote, "I could have thrown a football as hard as I could and not hit the other side." This thing's only 30 feet in diameter. So there was something going on, David, something going on, space-time continuum, time warp, gravity well, or something that appeared that this craft was 10 times bigger on the inside than it was on the outside. That's something we've heard about in other cases as well. Now, on the upper left detailed part of this drawing, Rudy has depicted, to the best of our ability here, this vast cavernous interior of this craft, because this thing is only 30 feet in diameter. How are you going to be able to not hit the side if it's only 30 feet. Something was going on the interior here. So he's photographing the display panels, the buttons, the switches, the dials, the levers. And then when this was done and they completed photographing the interior of the craft, they were told to go into another portion of this underground facility and photograph an autopsy as it was actually going on. At least 3 ET beings were being autopsied. So I'm going to take you to the next full color illustration showing you what this craft may have looked like if it was on an overhead crane. We're not completely sure exactly which type crane they were using, but we want to show this netting and we want to show this 30-foot diameter disc-shaped craft. What I want to do now is I want to take you inside the craft, and this is a blow-up of what the craft may have looked like. Now we're inside the craft, and this may have been what it looked like if we were on the... You could throw a football here and not hit the other side, because we're talking about this cavernous interior. So it was either a gravity well, a time distortion, or something going on with gravity associated that makes this thing appear at least 10 times bigger. So what we want to do now is we want to show a full color illustration of this autopsy being performed on at least one of these bodies that was in this underground facility. And that's what he's describing. He said that when the medical personnel started using a scalpel on one of the bodies, there was green fluid that came out, and they were photographing all this. So they probably have not only motion picture film reel, but probably still photographer as well. I mean, they've got this evidence. We definitely need to get to this evidence. Now, what type of proof do we have that there are these underground facilities? Because we've heard about these DUMBs, these deep underground military bases for decades now. So I started digging, and I came across this LA Times article. This is June 11th, 1972. I'm showing a picture of this article. Tube shuttle system, it says here, LA to New York in half an hour, 10,000 mile an hour tunnel train plan developed. And we'll take it to the next slide here that shows you the detailed cutaway of this thing. So they're using vacuum pumps, they've got bumpers, they've got lateral coils. In this article, they describe how this thing actually works. So how do we know that this is something that's not a fantasy? Do we have any paperwork? Do we have any way that we can back this up? Do we have any breadcrumbs that we can follow that tracks the legacy of this technology? That brings me to this document. This is Project RAN, Proceedings of the Second Protective Constructive Symposium, Deep Underground Construction, March 24th, 25th, 26th, 1959, by the RAND Corporation. So we're going to go into their own documents here, and this is what they say. Just as airplanes, ships, and automobiles have given man mastery of the surface of the earth, tunnel boring machines and shaft sinkers will give him access to the subterranean world. It is our aim to provide machines which will supply the ever-increasing demand in mining and construction of underground facilities. So, David, what they're telling us here in their own government documents is that they're already doing this. They're already doing these tunnel boring operations, these shaft sinkers, and they're expanding their operations. It's already a done deal. And that article came out in 72. So it's anybody's guess how deep this really goes here. All right, actionable item. Senators and congressmen with the appropriate security clearances should locate this facility and others, find out what is stored there, and what other underground installations this may be connected to. That needs to happen. All right, next one. U.S. Marine Corps diver off the coast of Okinawa, 1991. So this is at a depth of 1.5 miles. We're talking very deep here. So this particular witness, who's a Marine, he goes in what's called a DSRV, and he dives down to 1.5 miles. And what does he see when he gets there? Boom. He sees this 50 feet per side craft. It's triangular. Got to give credit to Dr. Greer for digging this one up here. And he said that the primary source indicated that the silt and the portion at the bottom of the ocean where this thing had embedded itself in looked as though it had put up enough debris that it was between 40 and 50 years at the bottom of the ocean. And they definitely described some hieroglyphic writing on one side of this triangular shaped craft. And this is at a depth of 1.5 miles. So we'll go to the full color rendering here. And this shows you what this thing may have looked like as they're at depth here. And can you imagine looking through one of these porthole windows and seeing this craft? I mean, this thing isn't supposed to be here. It appears that there are probably a transnational team of lab coat technicians, linguists, scientists that are trying to interpret and figure out what these symbols mean, because we've got these symbols on multiple different configurations of these craft. All right, next one, McClellan Air Force Base, California, 1973. This is by Chris Kofi, and this is by test pilot astronaut Ellison Onizuka. This is page 153, case A3. So he's at this facility, and about 12 other test pilots are brought into a briefing room. And this is Ellison Onizuka right here. This is a test pilot before he was an astronaut. They're brought into this room, and there was a general there. The lights go down. He's standing next to a movie projector. He turns on this projector, and on this forward wall, they have this 5-minute black and white movie of 2 ET bodies on slabs in an autopsy type configuration here. And this astronaut test pilot is just, he cannot believe what he's seeing here. He's shocked at what he's seeing. When the movie is over, they turn off the projector. There is no debrief. Now, within this book that Leonard Stringfield wrote, there's at least 3 other cases of a movie similar to this being shown to military personnel at multiple different military facilities and bases. So it looks like what they were doing, David, they were using this as a trial balloon to test this on our best pilots, our best engineers, technical personnel, military personnel. Could they handle this new paradigm? It was kind of to gauge the psychological response of what this reaction would be to something like this. There was no debrief after this was all over here. Now, I want to bring up this point. This is a secondary independent confirmation source that there was such a facility at McClellan Air Force Base. This is Credit Open Minds, and this is a witness to a library that existed at the same facility. Here it says, David Armstrong claims his aunt used to work for a top secret UFO records library at McClellan Air Force Base. In his 20s, Armstrong went to visit her, and knowing he had an interest in the subject, Armstrong says his aunt let him take a look at the files. So there was files on crash retrievals. There were files on different UFO-shaped craft. There were body files, medical reports. At one time, there was absolutely this repository library at McClellan Air Force Base. This checks out with what Ellison Onizuka had talked about. Now, here is Ellison Onizuka. It turns out, David, that we were within 2 weeks of getting his testimony on record. He was going to be speaking to Leonard Stringfield in 2 weeks, but 2 weeks prior to, he died on January 28th, 1986 in the Challenger incident. So we were this close of getting his testimony. I wrote a letter to his widow. I tracked her down, and I included this report and the drawing. I never heard anything back. I don't know if she didn't get my letter, or she didn't want to talk about it, or Ellison never briefed his wife on what he saw back at McClellan Air Force Base. But bottom line is, I just never got a response. So who knows what would have happened if he would have told his wife and his wife would have confirmed the account. Next one. This is Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, 1974, page 327 in the book. This was a new hire. You can see her off to the left. She gave her 2-week notice, and her boss is off to the right. In a nutshell, in this particular case, they were both at a dinner engagement, and the subject of UFOs came up, and her new boss could tell that she was getting beaten up. And so this boss turned to the new hire and said, you know what? Do you want to see the proof? Do you want to see the physical evidence? And she turns to her boss and says, you mean now? And the guy says, yeah, right now. So he brings her in his car. They drive to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. This is back in 1974. He had the correct security clearances and a magnetic key card. So he inserted this key card into the reader. It opened up this door. They walked down this hallway. There's another key card reader. He inserts that into there, and that leads them to an underground morgue where he opens up one of these drawers with a handle, and on this chassis with rollers comes this gurney with a dead ET body. It's partially in one of these body bags, and she's looking at this ET corpse. Oversized head, oversized eyes, kind of a minute nose. And she is absolutely shocked to her core. Her whole outlook on the world had completely changed within 1 second. You can imagine this drive home as he's driving her home. She actually did touch the ET body. Now, when the 2 weeks was up and she was supposed to report to work that Monday morning, she got in, she talked to the personnel that was going to be, giving her a briefing on all of this in her first day at work. And it turns out that her boss died about a week to 2 weeks prior to. He completely disappeared, and his obituary was never published in the local newspaper. We have no idea what actually happened to this guy. He might have met a not too nice of ending here, but this woman talks about how this reaction that she had to this new reality here. All right, next one. Source, retired Air Force pilot, late 1950s. This came from an interesting collection that was associated with one of our Army personnel, Clifford Stone. This is late 1950s. And in this report, it talks about a motion picture film clip that was about 5 to 6 minutes in length. And the movie pans to the interior of a craft. This was a large craft, 60 feet in diameter, 10 feet tall. It had a gash inside the craft itself. This was a part of a retrieval operation, and it appears that when this craft came down, the propulsion system breached a hull, and that's why you see the shrapnel coming out. They had actually retrieved the propulsion system, but then this movie clip pans toward the inside wall, showing you these display panels, these buttons and switches that made up the interior of the craft itself. And then off to the right of this motion picture film reel, there were 3 ET bodies that were dead, that were covered by what looked like small blankets. That's talked about in this report right here. Here's kind of a detailed view of what that may have looked like if we were there or could see this motion picture film reel. All right, next one. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, April 1962. This is a exchange pilot. He was part of the 350th Tactical Aircraft Tactical Air Center Fighter Wing. And this is page 88, page A6, case A6, 1962. And this particular fighter pilot, he was in charge of a small squadron of additional pilots, and he was in charge of their health. And so what they were looking at is they were jogging down this row of hangars, and they were looking for a mobile racquetball court because they had to make one additional wall to complete this court. So they walk down this row of hangars, they look off inside, and there is this 15-foot diameter dish-shaped craft. It's being guarded by military police with carbides. It's roped off, and it's propped up by 2 engine test stands. And they're looking at this thing. They can't believe what they're seeing. It looked like 2 discus that you would see at a track and field meet. 2 discus with barely a seam around the outer circumference of the craft. And they're told to immediately turn about face and go back to where they came from and forget about what they had saw. Now, I've got his quote from this pilot here. And this is what he said. The guard challenged by saying, quote, "I don't think you're supposed to be here, sir." And I replied to the affirmative, and we turned about face and departed, mumbling to ourselves that the good old U.S. had developed or had all along flying saucers in service. So when you hear these reports after reports from credible military sources, I tend to trust our military fighter pilots. They make up our best military witnesses. I would trust this case here. All right, next one. The other Roswell. UFO crash, Texas-Mexican border. This is from the book by Noe and Rubin, good friends. And this is spring 1955, right around the Texas-Mexican border, south of Del Rio, Texas. So we've got a multiple B-47s that were heading westbound over southern Texas. They were being escorted by F-86 Sabre jets. And so you can see here, I've got the map of where this actually took place, just south of the Rio Grande River. So you've got 4 F-86s that are escorting B-47s. And then all of a sudden, a dish-shaped craft comes screaming by their flight path. One of these F-86s peels away. I'm going to go back one slide here, kind of describing what he saw. He did a low pass over the crash scene just south of the Rio Grande River. And as he got a low pass, he got a very good look at this entire operation. So he landed at Carswell Air Force Base. He gets out of his F-86. He drives to Corsica, gets in a 2-place high-wing tail dragger Aranca. He flies back to the crash site while it's still night out, but it's starting to get cold. It's still a little bit light here. And what he sees when he lands is what's depicted in this drawing by Rudy here. He saw a 25-foot diameter dish-shaped craft, 5 feet tall. The dome had popped off. He was with a friend. It left a debris trail, and the Mexican military got there before the American military got there. And he said the primary eyewitness indicated that what the Mexican military was doing is they were going inside their 6x6 troop transport off to the left. They were taking these covers and blankets and putting the blankets on the debris. The debris was still warm, heating up the blankets, and they were putting it on their bodies to warm them as the night got colder. Now, he also mentioned there was a hull breach on the side of the craft, and he walked over and looked inside. I want to take you over here and do a detailed view. There were at least 4 ET bodies that were burned, they were dismembered, they were charred. And according to Air Force pilot Robert Willingham, who's the primary eyewitness, he said, quote, that the bodies had arms that looked like broomsticks. So it was this ghastly, macabre scene here. I'm going to go to the full color rendering. This is what this craft may have looked like. The dome is popped off. We've got the military personnel. Mexican personnel are warming themselves up with the blankets. And then I'm going to do a detailed view here and zoom in and give you a look inside of this hull breach where you can see the bodies that were burnt up and mangled. And this is what it may have looked like if we were there at the time of this actual incident. Okay, next one, Coyame incident. UFO crash near Presidio, Texas by Noe and Rubin. This is August 25th, 1974, Coyame, Mexico. So we've got a 172 heading southbound over southern Texas. There was a dish-shaped craft heading northbound, and it was going 2,530 miles an hour. It dropped down from 75,000 feet altitude to the same altitude as the 172. And there was a mid-air collision over Coyame, Mexico. Kind of hard to see in this map here, but in this map, if you look to the left, you've got Coyame. So you've got all this debris raining down. And immediately, the Mexican army started this retrieval operation. And David, do you have any idea what happened next in this operation?
I'm hoping you can tell us in 90 seconds.
Okay, we can do it in 90 seconds. All right. The elements of the intelligence community were monitoring the radio traffic from the Mexican military. You've got the National Security Agency and the Central Intelligence Agency are monitoring all this while it's going on. They had a bird that flew over this thing, so they had a heads up on this. When the Mexican army loaded this up on an 18-wheeler tractor trailer lowboy truck, they had a Jeep up front, they had a 6x troop transport. They're going down the road with the craft on the trailer, and all of a sudden, David, this convoy of military vehicles stops dead in its tracks. And there were military personnel. The drivers were slumped over on the steering wheels. Some of them were half in and half out with the open doors. Some of them were laying on the ground. They were all dead. Every Mexican soldier was dead associated with this retrieval operation. Wow. That's the point where the Americans got involved, and they essentially stole out from under the nose of the Mexican government this dish-shaped craft that was 16 feet in diameter, 5 feet tall, had a low-rising dome on top. There was an impact section where it hit the 172, and we had at least 3 Bell UH-1 Huey helicopters and one CH-53 Sea Stallion that retrieved the craft and flew it back to CDC headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. In a nutshell, that is this retrieval operation. So here's a picture of what these helicopters look like. 3 Bell UH-1s and one CH-53 Sea Stallion.
Michael Schratt, another amazing job on Spaced Out Radio. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas to you. We'll be back with hour number 3, kicking off with Steve Stockton and Among the Missing. Spaced Out Radio continues after this. Michael, if you could do a quick favor here, tell everybody where they could find information from you and your books, my friend.
No problem. I have a YouTube channel called Blue Room Media, 3 words. Just type that into YouTube. You'll see all my PowerPoint presentations. Everything I do is fully illustrated, fully referenced. It's all got illustrations, sketches, drawings. I give you the sources where you can verify the information. I have a book called Dark Files, A Pictorial History of Forgotten and Obscure UFO Encounters. It's available on Amazon. It's all fully illustrated. It's all fully referenced.
My friend, appreciate you coming back on Spaced Out Radio.
Yep. No problem. Great to be with you.
We'll talk soon.
Okay, take care. Yep. Bye.
Bye-bye. Michael Schratt, everybody. There he goes into the blue yonder. We love him around here. I'm going to take a quick break. I'll be right back, guys. Take care. All right. What a great show. Sherry, how are you? Nice to see you. Great show, everybody. We got 1 hour to go. Lots more coming at you. Oob to Joe's Bane. You've got Crash Retrievals. Yeah, that was an education tonight. Absolute education. Thank you to Grant, T-Bone times 4, Pam H., Ant-Man, Mark, Maureen, Mennonite Abe, Charles, and Faze Will. Very much appreciate the super chat love tonight. Don't forget, you can shop at our store on our website. We do not have ugly swag, people. Here comes hour 3.
Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. Good to have you with us. My name is Dave Scott. Always appreciate earning your listening ears wherever you are on this beautiful planet we call Earth. Hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on Odyssey Radio, TalkStream Live, and KPNL. All of our archives are free. You can join us at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Tonight it's Hecatome. Hecatome is your password. Use it wisely, space travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and you can join us on Patreon in the SOR Space Travelers Club. It is that time of the night where we say hello to Steve Stockton from Among the Missing YouTube channel and tonight's Weird Story.
Hello, friends. Welcome to Among the Missing YouTube channel on Spaced Out Radio. I'm Steve Stockton, and I'm about to take you on an unbelievable journey of people just like you. Their stories and encounters will haunt us on Among the Missing. Dennis R. Larson, a construction worker from Montana, returned to Maine in 1987 to reconcile with his second wife, who had previously divorced him. However, he published an advertisement in 2 Maine newspapers seeking a new wife. Among the 3 women who responded, Kathy Frost, age 25, was one of them. According to the Bangor Daily News, Kathy's family and friends described her as, quote, an extremely desperate, lonely individual who was unable to get a man, end quote. She told her friends that even though she was not in love with him, she would marry Larson, hoping to learn to love him. The couple married just a few weeks later in September of 1987. Larson wasted no time acquiring a substantial life insurance policy for himself with an additional rider that covered his new wife for accidental death. Kathy was considering ending her marriage with Larson. However, Larson convinced her to go to Bar Harbor to work things out. Despite her reluctance, Kathy agreed to go on the trip, but her friends and family members advised her against it. During the journey, she planned to talk to Larson and tell him she wanted to end the marriage. On the evening of October 11, 1987, the Larsons went for a walk to Otter Cliff, located on Mount Desert Island. They decided to split up and explore the area separately, hoping to spot some sea otters. However, soon after, Mr. Larson heard his wife scream and rushed to find her. Unfortunately, he discovered that she had fallen off the cliff. Mr. Larson quickly returned to the road and stopped a passing vehicle to get help. He then called the park ranger's office from Jordan Pond House. Rescuers arrived at the scene and later found Kathy at the bottom of the cliff. Sadly, she was pronounced deceased at 9 p.m. According to the Bangor Daily News, during the investigation into Kathy's death, Larson returned home to Montana. Police Detective Jeffrey Harmon traveled there to question him about Kathy's demise. Larson revealed that he had pushed Kathy off the cliff in retaliation after she had shoved him and said she was leaving him. I pushed her too hard, I guess, Larson told Harmon. Larson also admitted that he pushed his first wife, Leslie R. Larson, into a stream near Wolf Creek on June 19, 1975, ending her. Since that fateful October day in 1987, it is said that on wet and foggy evenings around dusk, one may hear the solitary scream of a young bride plummeting to her demise from the high ridges of Otter Cliff. Next up, missing hikers and tragic accidents. Sean Kelly, 1993. In August 1993, Sean Kelly, a 17-year-old student from Henrico County, Virginia, was vacationing with his family and a friend in Acadia National Park when tragedy struck. According to East District Ranger Robert W. Yates, quote, Sean had been watching the surf and was hiking back to his family's tent at the island park when he slipped on gravel and tumbled, end quote. Sean fell approximately 50 feet and was unconscious when he was taken to the local hospital. He suffered head injuries and a broken wrist. He never regained consciousness. Sadly, Sean passed away later that evening after being transferred to Eastern Maine Medical Center in Bangor, Maine. Ranger Yates said, quote, people are always climbing all over the rocks here. This was just a very unfortunate accident, end quote.
Thank you to Steve Stockton from Among the Missing for another creepy, weird story that you can find only at Among the Missing on YouTube. They're close to 100,000 subscribers. And hey, you can go hit subscribe on their channel as well as Steve opens up hour 3 of this show each and every Monday through Friday night. From the mysterious to the weird and strange of the mountains of Montana, it is that time of the night where we say hello to Super Duke from World Bigfoot Radio. Super Duke, the crypted report with Super Duke. Here we go, Super Duke, story time, telling us all the weird, strange, cryptid reports that are going on around the world. And Super Duke, it's always a pleasure to have you on Spaced Out Radio from World Bigfoot Radio, my man. We'll get you to unmute your mic, too.
Always fun to be here. You have such a wonderful audience, and we share many of them in common. I noticed a lot of them were over there on my channel on Thursday and Friday when I was showing the first and second episode of the Cryptid Report from right here on your channel. And
Nice.
A bunch of them had seen it over here. They were over there anyway. The ones that were over there and didn't know that it was on over here were all like pretty happy about it. Went, yeah, we should, if we're up that late, and I got, people in the Eastern time zone that aren't up that late. So they're like, oh, we're really glad you're still showing it over here, Duke. And for all you folks over here that may see it live and everything and go, well, I already saw it live on Dave's show. Why do I want to watch it again on Duke's show? Well, because Duke's going to maybe put in some stuff that wasn't on here. Like the show I put out on Friday, I was talking to Dave and telling him about stolen Bigfoot calls. Those are on the show.
Yeah.
So the stuff we talk about on here might end up on the other version of it on my show where you can watch the video and the stuff that we're referencing. So just in case you somehow think that catching it here live is going to be the last word, you might be wrong. And you might want to check out the other version.
Yeah, and we say thank you for that, too, because, there's not a lot of channels out there, Duke, that actually collaborate with information. And the fact that we could do that for you and bring this segment over to World Bigfoot Radio as well is just a real show of professionalism on how, we can all work together to get the same message out.
Well, you're from the UFO community and I'm from the Bigfoot community, and we're facing essentially the same dilemmas, issues, problems, and roadblocks. So it behooves us, if whatever branch of the obscure science community that you're in, don't ignore people from other branches from it. And anytime you can work together with people, certainly within your own branches of it, but even outside of that, they all have information to share. And there may be somebody in the UFO community that has some tiny piece of the puzzle that relates to the Bigfoot thing that we're never going to find out because we're not talking to those guys, and vice versa. So the more everybody works together on all this, it's like, trying to play a football game by yourself against an entire football team on the opposite side. If you have a team on your side, the chances are much better you're going to move the ball down the field and get a touchdown at some point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's keep scoring, my man. What do
Right
you
on.
got for us tonight?
Well, first of all, the general announcements. In addition to Dave's cool show now being on my show, coming up this weekend, one of the people that's in the chat room right now, Brown Dwarf, is going to be on my show talking about UAP. And I use this term pretty much the same as Dave does. I'm not talking about flying saucers and little gray or green men. I'm talking about unknown aerial phenomenon. In this case, we're going to be talking about things like sky jellyfish and air squids and things that people have also seen and got video of. And if these things actually exist, you could put them really close to the top of the list for suspects for missing 411. So you guys might want to check this show out.
Love it. Love it. Absolutely.
So, what are we doing? We are once again on David Weatherly's Monsters of Big Sky Country. And as you recall from previous installments, we're now almost up to 1980.
Let's go, my man. Let's do this.
This is just ridiculous to me. I'm like, how did it end up moving into an area with so many Bigfoot sightings everywhere around here? Like 2/3 or 3/4 of these sightings, at least, are within 100 miles of where I'm sitting right now. So it's like, yeah, there's been a lot of sightings around here. Okay, why did the Bigfoot cross the road? Well, to get to the other side. In the winter of 1979, a motorist on Highway 200 saw a light-colored Sasquatch crossing the road late one night. The witness told the BFRO, quote, "What had to have been a Bigfoot crossed the road in front of me at the end of the guardrails, headed north. He was well over 6 feet tall. He didn't even turn his head to look at me. He just walked across the road. His hair was not extremely long or matted, but light-colored, and the wind was whipping through it, and it was darker at the skin than at the tips," unquote. This sighting occurred at around 11:30 at night, and temps were well below zero. Now we're up to 1980. In 1982, a group of young men out riding horses on the Blackfoot Reservation in Glacier County had a Bigfoot encounter preceded by a warning from their horses. Charles K. Wolftail reported the incident, and it was posted on BigfootEncounters.com. The men had been riding most of the day, and with evening approaching, they had turned for home. As they approached the trailhead, one of the horses was reluctant and fought the bridle. The men pushed on, and once they were well in the brush, their horses started behaving oddly, stepping softly and snorting, as if bothered by a scent. As the reporting witness states, quote, "Our horses then began jumping in different directions like they were scared of something. The first thing on all of our minds was a bear. We began looking in different directions, trying to find the location of the bear. I don't remember who was the first to sight what we saw. I just heard him swear and asked the rest of us to look. We all looked in the direction he was pointing and saw this very tall thing running on two legs beside us, and then it turned in front of us. The thing crossed the trail in front of us about 40 feet and stopped at the edge of the brush. It just stared at us as if in the same amount of amazement as we were, and then it disappeared into the trees just as fast," unquote. The witness described the creature as the hairiest man he had ever seen, and it was well over 6 feet tall. The party returned to the spot the following day and found broken branches about 6 to 8 feet high in the area where they had seen the creature. They also found footprints, though no size was indicated in the report. Another BFR report details a sighting from the summer of '82 from Lewis and Clark County. Some teenage boys were near the town of Lincoln, staying in a cabin when the incident unfolded. Lincoln is so small, if you blink, you'll miss it. And the only thing that's there is a jerky factory and a little outlet where you can stop and buy jerky at the jerky factory. And guess what? They have their own Bigfoot shirt there. Every dinky, teeny little town in Montana has their own Bigfoot shirt. I actually got one. I'll wear it next week just so I can prove to you guys. Oh, my God. So here he was in Lincoln, staying at a cabin when the incident unfolded. He says, "I felt as if we were being watched. The hair on the back of my neck even stood up. We heard something in the woods ahead of us. The noise stopped, and we continued back towards the cabin. About 400 yards from the cabin, I looked toward the wood line, and I saw a figure standing up and looking at us. The creature was black in color and at least 6 feet tall. the boys found a massive footprint in the area 2 days later. The reporting witness states that he wears a size 12 shoe, but the print was 4 to 6 inches longer and a lot wider than his foot. The boys had a second sighting as they were walking back to the cabin. One boy noticed something in the woods and pointed to the area. Quote, I finally saw what he saw. Sitting on an old tree stump was what I believed to be a Bigfoot. We were only about 50 yards away from him, and I could see him clearly. It sat there looking at us. It looked in another direction while we were staring at it, and it was like he did not have a neck. He moved his whole upper torso and then looked back at us. When he did this, we took off running, unquote. A Montana correspondent told me about an incident from June 9th, 1985. Reportedly, 3 hikers saw an ape-like creature fording a river in waist-deep water. The sighting was near Kalispell in Flathead County. An encounter posted on OregonBigfoot.com comes from a witness who spotted a Bigfoot in the Hamilton area, which again is about 40 miles from here. 1986, no exact date given. The witness watched as the creature came out of the woods and approached a salt lick that had been placed out for deer. According to the witnesses, quote, he appeared to sniff it and then pulled it out of the ground and threw it. It was thrown 3 car lengths with a 100-pound cement block attached to the bottom of it. The reporting witness's grandfather retrieved a .22 rifle and started shooting at the creature, but it had no effect. As the report states, quote, the thing just stood there as if he was shaking them off, and then made a whiny noise and calmly walked back into the woods. And the moral of the story is don't waste your time shooting with a .22. It's just like a pellet gun. It's just going to make them go, why? What are you doing? I may decide to be aggressive now. Stop doing that. Bigfoot researcher Bobby Short, RIP, received an account from Audrey Dibble at Walkerville, Silver Bow County involving incidents at Bull Run Gulch in 1988. Dibble reports that the tracks of 2 Bigfoot creatures were found around the ranch that her son and his family were renting at the time. Dibble's daughter-in-law had hiked a mile up the gulch the day before the tracks were found, and this seemed to attract the attention of the creatures. When the family backtracked the Bigfoot trail, they found that the creatures had followed the woman's track to the ranch. The larger set of tracks circled around the house and barn and into the fields below the home. The smaller creature stayed near the rabbit hutches. It's noted in the reports that the smaller creature's tracks were, quote, curled, unquote. The larger prints measured 17 inches in length, and while the smaller prints came in at 14.5 inches long, Dibble reports. Quote, we took pictures of the prints, and the thing that struck us most about the prints was that the creatures had to have been massive. As it was very cold and the snow and the ice on the ground was frozen so hard, we could jump up and down without breaking through to the ground. But every print of both creatures went completely through the ice, unquote. The following week, horrible screams were heard near the ranch. Dibble adds, quote, at about midnight, my daughter-in-law called me in a panic and said there was a horrible screaming coming through the trees on the other side of the fields, and that she didn't think anything human could sound so guttural or masculine or angry. A report posted on the BFRO website details an incident from May 1989 in Park County. 2 people were out climbing on the west side of the crazy mountains and went to a timbered spot at about 7,000-foot elevation. The flat-top buttress had one juniper about 4 to 5 feet high. As the hikers were returning down to their car, the reporting witness turned and looked back at the spot they had left. Quote, I was surprised to see that in addition to the lone tree, there was another dark form that was swaying back and forth. I thought to myself, that's cool. There's a bear up there. Then the bear stood up and walked off the flat area down into a small rocky notch and up some steep rocks and disappeared into the timber. It appeared to cover the distance in about 4 to 5 strides with a very fluid motion. The reporting witness notes that both he and his companion had the sensation of the hair going up on the back of their necks when they witnessed the, quote, bear, unquote. Additionally, the witness's friend had a mixed breed dog on the hike, and the animal acted strangely, growling and generally on guard while they were in the area. Another pair of witnesses experienced a hair-raising feeling, not because of a sighting, but because of weird vocalizations heard around their property. In the summer of 1989, two brothers on the Flathead Reservation heard strange vocalizations near their family residence about 20 miles northwest of Missoula. Hey, that's where I am. According to the BFRO report, the incident occurred in the late afternoon on a July day. The reporting witnesses said his brother came rushing to him and alerted him that he had heard something unusual in the woods around their home. The man described the noises, quote, I had heard a lot of strange sounds growing up in the deep woods over the years, elk mating calls, ruffed grouse beating their wings, coyotes, so on, but never anything like this. I can't really describe the sound except that it was a high-pitched tone from a living thing that was very resonant, powerful, and well-controlled in its execution. It made the hair stand up on the back of my neck, unquote. The brothers rushed to where the family dogs were and observed that the animals were looking into the woods in the direction the sounds had come from and barking. Quote, I had never seen them barking like this, not even at bears, unquote, the witness reported. In short order, the creature's vocalizations were answered by another similar creature. Whatever was out there, there seemed to be two of them, and they seemed to be communicating. We continued to listen, nothing for a minute or two. Then we heard two more distinct calls, this time from the same general direction in the woods, yet separated. They were now coming from a further distance. Again, they seemed to be replying or communicating to one another. At the end of the report, the witness adds an interesting anecdote. Quote, I had another experience with a close friend the following year in 1990 involving what we believed were Bigfoot tracks. When we told her about the incident, my friend's grandmother, who's in her late 80s and had lived in the location where we saw the tracks her whole life, relayed a story about how she and her husband had seen a Sasquatch in that area over 20 years ago, which means around 1970.
Wow. Duke, we got 2 minutes to go here before we go to break. The one thing that I always love about these type of stories, Duke, is how there's always these patterns, that kind of show up. Like you just mentioned, 20 years previous, there was another sighting. And it just seems like you get these hot spots and they all seem to just kind of coalesce with each other, over time.
I think in a lot of these places, the locals don't talk about it, but they're aware that something is out there, and some of them know what it is actually. And in order to continue to live there, you've either got to, make a kind of a psychic amends with the idea that there's going to be these big, huge things living out in the woods that are in this area. Otherwise, what are you going to do? You're going to go to war with them, or are you going to leave? If you're going to stay there, well, then you got to sort of put up with them. And after a while, it just becomes like, well, those are those big hairy things that live out in the woods. And they don't necessarily talk to anybody about it. Sometimes all the neighbors know that they're out there and they'll even talk to each other about it, but they're not going to make reports. And you really stumble on a lot of this stuff when you start doing the research on it.
Very true. Very true. Like even in my area, Duke, so we only got about 40 seconds to go. There are reports over the last 70 years around here, and the town is only 50 years old. I mean, it's been established for 100 and some years, but the actual town is about 55 years old. And the reports going back, they're all in one vicinity. But I mean, the point that I'm getting at is, but you may have a sighting at, say, this lake over here in 1921, and then again in 1974, and then at another lake in 1995, and they're all within like a 20, 30 mile radius as the crow flies.
Yeah, it's that one family. They're staying there and they're not moving.
Right? Get off my trees.
Get off my lawn, stupid humans.
That's right. Super Duke for World Bigfoot Radio. We continue right after this with the Cryptid Report on the mighty SOR. Stay tuned. We will be right back. That's some serious Super Duking tonight.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have energy tonight. I don't know why either, because I recorded a 2-hour show for somebody else's channel earlier. I should be worn out, but I'll survive till the end of this one, then I'll collapse. Tomorrow I got to record Brown Dwarf for my show. So,
yeah.
Busy.
I woke up this morning with a brutal headache.
Oh, God.
Brutal headache. I got to my daytime job, and I was there like 45 minutes. I went to my boss, and I'm like, yeah, Dave's not doing this tonight. or this morning. Dave's just not doing it. And you know, the one thing about being a workaholic like I am, if you're not feeling good, they know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're not feeling good, they're just like, man, if Dave's taking a day off, he must not be feeling good. But I had a lot of sleep this afternoon, so I
Good to catch up on it. I slept until almost
Yeah.
noon today, but I was up until 4 a.m. too. I'm gonna grab a couple of drags off a SIG here real quick.
You go, buddy. You go. Oh, Christine. Actually, I had a lot of water yesterday. I'm starting to drink more water again. I'm trying my best to try and lose some weight again. So that's why I'm getting my body fixed. I think it was just due to my treatment that I had yesterday. Pyramid 7, how are you? Yeah, so I think it had to do with my treatment yesterday and just my body reacting to it. So that's okay. That's okay. It felt better this afternoon, so yeah. And my beard looks good. It's the main thing, right? I actually have set a date for November 30th. So in 2 days, that's where I'm changing my diet up and starting to eat a little bit more healthy again. And I got to get back into some good habits that I was in late last year. Once I get into those good habits, then my weight will just kind of melt right off. Lymphatic drainage. Yes, that is included in my I don't even know what the hell lymphatic drainage is. Hold on. Now lymphatic drainage. Oh yes, the guy who's taking care of me does that. Yes.
Man, it is cold out there right now.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
Can't even enjoy a cigarette. Too cold. Colder than a witch's bube in a dry ice plated bra.
Yes. You know, I took my son to hockey this evening and got into the vehicle and was like, oh well, I don't recognize this wind from a year ago. You know, you're not supposed to be back. By the way, you're like 4 weeks late.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the peculiar thing here right now because it's deceptively not winter looking. Yes, there's no leaves on the trees, but we don't have any snow on the ground and there's a lot of grass. It's all green.
But
And then it's like 12 degrees.
The Farmer's Almanac actually called for that, where it was going to be a late winter and an absolute like once the snow starts falling, it's not going to stop, and it's supposed to be a mild temperature wise winter.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Perfect time for that to happen. The heating bill is going to be through the roof anyway, so that'll help.
No goodness. Yeah, up here, just so you know how political things are getting up here with our illustrious, very honest and well-mannered prime minister. If you vote for any other party than his, and you live on the East Coast, he is reducing your carbon tax for the winter. But us out west who seem to vote for a different party do not get that break.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's supposedly democracy.
That is democracy. Here we go, Duke. 2 seconds. Here we go with the final half hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. Super Duke and World Bigfoot Radio's Cryptid Report continuing right after this. Reminder to you that if you missed most of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and you can join the Space Travelers Club on Patreon. Here we go, Super Duke with the Cryptid Report. Continue on with us, big man.
Well, fortuitously enough, our timing was such that we ended up right at the end of the 80s. So here we go with the next decade in Montana into the 1990s. We're only 30 years behind now. A man in the Libby area of Lincoln County saw a trio of Bigfoot in January 1990 while he was walking his dog in the woods behind his home. The report comes via Ray Crow's Bigfoot Behavior, Volume 3. The man said the thing was a human-like animal. The witness was alerted to the Bigfoot's presence after hearing footsteps behind him. He turned and spotted the creature about 100 yards from his position. He watched as the creature made its way across a field. The man's dog ran back to the house, presumably afraid of the Bigfoot, and the man followed suit. As he was headed back to his home, he saw two more hairy bipeds running across the field. He also reports hearing the creatures emit a screeching howl. In 1990, Bigfoot hit the front page of the Billings Gazette. Guess what town that comes out in? When the paper reported on sightings occurring on the Fort Peck Reservation. According to the July 24th edition of the paper, residents in the Fort Kip area of the reservation were worried about the creature's presence there. Indian Affairs officers spoke to the paper about the sightings. Quote, "Everybody's kind of keeping their eyes open," said Glenn Littlebird, agency special officer. "People around here are taking it seriously," he said. "They're kind of scared because, that certain type of creature has been sighted around that area numerous times," unquote. Teresa Buck Elk of Fort Kip claimed she spotted one of the hairy men running along U.S. Highway 2. She said the creature was more than 6 feet tall and ran on two legs. It crossed the highway and ran into the bush as the woman observed it. Buck Elk also smelled a strong foul odor when the creature was nearby. Law enforcement officers from both Roosevelt County and the BIA, which is the Bureau of Indian Affairs, investigated the scene, but they found no prints or other evidence of the hairy man's presence. The paper noted, quote, "Fred Steele of the Indian Health Service said he grew up hearing stories about Bigfoot, so he interviewed several people in the area and believes the creature is, in fact, a Bigfoot. People in that area had heard strange noises during the night before the creature was sighted," Steele said. The BFRO received a report about a Ravalli County encounter that took place in September 1991. Ravalli County is the county directly to the south of me. The reporting witness in this case was an experienced big game hunting guide who recalls, quote, "Coming down a game trail on a ridge in deep, dark timber. My horse was tired. All of a sudden, he became nervous. A little breeze coming to me. Went about 75 yards and my horse started looking to the left. About 25 to 30 feet, there was a big root ball from a downed pine tree. From the waist up, crouching down, was a Bigfoot. I looked at him in the eyes. It was surprised as I. It was not an ape. It looked more like a man, but it had hair all over, about 6 to 8 inches long. I had a rifle, but I was so close to it, I was afraid to make any sudden moves other than just keep riding. I'll never forget that, and someday, if funds are available, I'd like to make an effort to find it again." Excuse me. BFR investigator John Salmon followed up on the report and had a phone conversation with the witness. Salmon gleaned a few other details from speaking with the man. The Bigfoot had reddish-brown hair that covered its body. The facial hair was thin and did not cover the entire face. Skin was brownish, and face was more like a man than an ape. The witness believes the creature was male since no breasts were visible. The Bigfoot was large, with 35 to 40-inch wide shoulders. Height could not be determined because the creature was crouching behind the root ball during the sighting. Solomon found the witness credible and points out that the man's extensive experience as a game guide has made him familiar with a wide range of large animals in the region. Well, thanks a lot, Captain Obvious. The guy's a big game guide. He can tell you if it's a frickin' bear when it's 10 feet away from you. Yeah, no kidding. 3 people hiking in the Gallatin National Forest in the summer of 1993 saw a massive creature running through the woods. It was June 3rd, and the trio was in the Portal Creek area late in the day. Concerned about an incoming storm, they decided to double time it down the west side of a windy pass so that they could make it back to their vehicle, hopefully before the foul weather came in and caught them. They heard something that was a distinct sound and not part of the wind that was blowing, something they thought was a howl. When they reached a clearing, they again heard what the reported witness described as a howl that sent a chill up his spine. Moments later, the hikers saw the creature that had apparently issued the sound. The witness described the moment in a BFRO entry, quote, "Something massive and dark and clearly running on 2 legs ran through the brush about 60 yards away and disappeared into the forest. I don't think any of us moved or spoke for about 5 minutes until we heard the howl, again, this time pretty far up and in the opposite direction than we were heading. We got out of there in a hurry." The July 1996 edition of the Montana Standard reported on the discovery of 14-inch footprints that were cast by researchers Shannon Kelly and Kelly Cundiff northwest of Helena. The pair said the tracks were discovered west of Canyon Creek. The researchers were drawn to the area after a number of reports led them to believe a Sasquatch was in that region. According to the paper, quote, "It seems that last year, miners familiar with the forest and most of the things living in it heard screams in the night unlike the sound of any animal they had ever heard before," Kelly said. So on the 4th of July, Kelly headed into the area in search of whatever had spooked the miners. On Friday, Cundiff joined him in the search. Then, on Sunday afternoon, Cundiff spotted what the two had been looking for, a large print embedded in the hard soil. He said, the prints were described as ape-like, and something had pulled up plants in the area. Kelly estimated the weight of the creature that left the tracks to be about 400 pounds. The pair planned to return to the site, and Kelly himself told the paper he would be in and out of the area throughout the summer. Ray Crow's Bigfoot Behavior Volume 2 lists an interesting sighting from 1997 involving an Immigration Service employee. Eldon Garvis was at the U.S.-Canadian border, 27 miles north of Harbor on Highway 33, the St. Joe Road, when he spotted a Bigfoot in a roadside ditch. Garvis's sighting was somewhere between the I-15 on February and was around 12:30 a.m. Excuse me, the 1st to 15th of February, 12:30 a.m. Garvis said the creature, as he passed by and estimated its height between 5 and 6 feet, was covered with hair and black in color. Garvis returned to the scene later and found 3-toed tracks in the snow. It was clear from the tracks the creature had turned around and retreated back into the field that it had come from. Garvis speculated that his vehicle's approach had frightened the beast away. Reportedly, a lone hunter out in Cascade County in May 1995 spotted an 8-foot-tall creature that had glowing eyes. The thing had reddish-brown hair, but no further description was offered. Apparently frightened, or startled, or both, the hunter fired at the creature, and when he did so, the thing vanished in a flash of light. Researcher Linda Moulton Howe recounted the incident on the June 18, 1995 edition of the Art Bell Show. In Where the Footprints End, Volume 2, authors Joshua Cutchin and Timothy Renner, who apparently has the report that I had in his book, reported an encounter from Glacier National Park. The incident occurred on July 30th, 1997. The witness, Travis, was working for the park doing maintenance and cleanup. He and another unnamed park employee were dispatched to clean a campsite area in the park and encountered a horrible, overpowering smell described as like a dead skunk. Continuing on the trail, one of the men exclaimed, "Oh my God, there's a Bigfoot!" The pair saw the creature lying on its side, tearing into a rotting tree. The loud exclamation from the witness obviously alerted the creature, and it jumped to its feet. Travis reported that he felt instantly nauseated. The park radio that the men carried suddenly crackled with static, which apparently upset the Bigfoot because it started shaking all over and then let out a, quote, ferocious roar, unquote. This was enough for the two witnesses, who promptly fled the scene. Reportedly, Travis was advised by some employees of the Forest Service to keep quiet about his encounter, telling him that no one would believe him anyway and that others would just make fun of him. Travis ignored their advice, shared his encounter, and started asking other park employees questions about Bigfoot. The bizarre twist in the story, according to Travis, a federal agent showed up in a black Ford Explorer to intimidate him for asking questions and talking about Bigfoot. Bigfoot researcher Bobby Short received a report in June 1998 that strange 5-inch tracks had been found along the Blackfoot River. There's speculation this was evidence of a juvenile or baby Bigfoot, but unfortunately no further details are available on that one. An entry on the BFRO website recounts a July 1999 roadside sighting of an upright hairy creature. The reporting witness and a friend were traveling east on US 90 in Park County when they saw a large reddish-brown creature walking on the side of the road. Danny, the reporting witness, writes, quote, "It was very large. I don't know exactly how big or how much it could have weighed, but I do know the hands of the animal hung to about the tops of the fence post it was walking next to." Top of the fence posts. These posts are 3 to 4 feet of exposed post. There were two of us who saw the creature walking. It was about 7:30 in the morning when the sightings occurred, and the creature was in clear view about 100 to 150 yards from the witnesses. In a follow-up interview, Danny clarified that there were other passengers in the van, but only one other person was awake and also saw the creature that Danny reported at the same time. So apparently that was a pretty good size one. But one of the things you should note from all those reports that I've just been reading is the sizes of them. They're not particularly gigantic. And this comes back to a point that I made over and over and over again, that when generally a witness sees a Bigfoot, it's usually a juvenile who hasn't got the good common sense to stay freaking hidden and not let humans see him. And the older ones don't make stupid mistakes like that, which is why you rarely have sightings of the really big ones. Generally, unless they want you to see them, and then God help you, they're not happy, which is why they're letting you see them. It's definitely time to leave at that point. And so, all right, we made it through the 90s. Now we're ready to go into our century. Another thing that I find interesting about this is look at how many reports there were from the 70s. It was ridiculous. And then the last two, 80s and 90s, there's reports, but nothing like as many as there were in the 70s. What the hell was going on then?
I don't know. I'm born in the 70s, my man. I don't recall it. The only Sasquatch I recall from the 70s is from the $6 million man.
Yep. Yeah, Andre the Bigfoot. Yeah, I'm from the beginning of the 60s. So by the time, I had my first sighting in 73. So I do remember the 70s, but I do not remember there being a huge Bigfoot flap here in Montana. So in that there's all these reports of it and stuff, this is like another good thing to pay attention to, because apparently there were a ton of reports from around here at that point, but they weren't making national media outside of the state of Montana or the local newspaper. Nobody was hearing about them, because I was totally, fascinated in this kind of thing. If I would have known there was a sighting report flap going on here in Montana, I would have been all over it, but no, there wasn't any internet. There wasn't any of that kind of media to carry that stuff around. And the mainstream media just wasn't that interested. The local newspaper might report it, but they weren't going to carry it in the next, state over or something. So a lot of this stuff in these little regional areas, as we were talking about earlier, there could have been tons of reports there, but it just never made it out of that little area. So people outside of that area are completely unaware of it.
Unbelievable. Duke, out of all the sightings, that David Weatherly reports on, and he's usually highly accurate in his writings and teachings that he has out, there seem to be a lot of close encounters, obviously in nature, because where else is Sasquatch going to be, right?
Yeah.
But but a lot of them also contain water. Like when we are in nature and around water, is this a highlighted prospect of where Sasquatch may be grazing, living, harmonizing, whatever it may be? And I realize that's a dumb question, okay, even though there are no dumb questions. But there are areas I've been in British Columbia where there's never been a sighting. Tons of water around,
Yeah.
never a sighting.
Yeah, just because there's water there doesn't guarantee that they're going to be there. Although the flip side of that is also true if you go all the way back to the 70s. That was that one movie called The Legend of Boggy Creek. And right at the beginning of it, the narrator says the creature always follows the creeks. It's always following the rivers. So even, there may be some areas where they're not around or anything, but in areas where they are around, going down to the creeks and the rivers after dark is a great way to have a random encounter with one of them. And there were some of the tribes on the West Coast that actually seemed to have had arrangements with them, where during the day was native fishing time and during the night was Sasquatch fishing time. And if the natives were out there fishing at night, the Sasquatch weren't happy about it. And also, they would set up fish traps and stuff, right? And they just trap the fish. Well, if they didn't have those fish out of the fish traps by dark, guess what? Somebody else thought that since they were in the river and it was night, it was theirs to take, even though it was in a fish trap. And then guess what happened? So they'd come out in the morning and all the fish they caught the previous day were all mysteriously gone for the fish trap. Well, who the hell took those? Well, you told them nighttime is when they could fish. You should have taken your fish out of the fish trap before the sun fell, because now it's free game for them as far as they're concerned.
Right.
So there's a lot of reports of this. I had Exorcist on my show who was having a bad night, and he was up late, and he decided he was going to put on his hip waders and little inner tube and go float around in a local pond in Colorado and do some night fishing. And apparently they wanted to go fishing too, and they didn't appreciate him being there. And they made quite the racket, and they shook full-size mesquite trees at him until he got the hint. And first he thought it was demons, so he started trying to exorcise them, which didn't do anything but make them madder. And then he realized those aren't demons, those are Bigfoot. And then very loudly and publicly went, "Sorry, guys, I didn't know this was your place. You didn't used to be here when I was here 8 years ago. I'm leaving now." And he's paddling out of this pond, trying to get out of there as fast as he could. So, yeah, he didn't go back night fishing over there again either.
Oh, man, I'll tell you, that just kind of freaks me out. We got about 3 minutes to go here, Duke. It is that time of year where we are starting to wind down and nature is starting to get a little bit more cold outside. It's easy for the Sasquatch to be moving around at this time of year, but maybe not for us, because those areas, due to snow or weather conditions, it just makes it a little bit more dangerous. What do you think the Sasquatch are doing at this time of year, according to your research?
Well, by this time of the year, they've gotten most of their winter food supply piled away in some cave or something somewhere, and they're planning on not moving around a whole lot. You'll still see them, temps down to like 0 or something. They'll go out and walk around. If it's, depends on the ground conditions too. They're acutely aware of the fact that they leave tracks in the snow. So the time that they can sense storm fronts coming in and stuff. So we've actually had good success with going out right before a big blizzard and finding tracks in the snow, because they know the blizzard's about to bury them. Or in between two snowstorms where one just ends and there's another one coming in the following day. And apparently they know it's going to snow again, and they'll just run around and make no effort to hide their tracks, knowing they'll be buried by the following day. So there's one thing to look for. But when it goes down to a certain low temperature, I think the only time they really come out is to send a sentinel out to walk around the edge of their territory and make sure they haven't got intruders or anybody in there causing trouble or something, and they just pretty much stay close to wherever their home base is.
Yeah, I can see that. They're not really migrating at this time.
No, they're mostly at this point, they've got most of the food that they need piled up. And during the winter, you can still hunt on the nicer days and stuff. They can go out and wring a deer's neck or something and bring it back. And of course, the nice thing about the winter is when you throw the deer outside the cave, it ain't going to rot.
Oh, I hear you. And you know what? It's funny. The other day we were out in the forest, and my buddy Phil all of a sudden says, "Hey, stop the vehicle! Stop the vehicle!" We stopped the vehicle, and in between the trees, all that's left of this moose is the spine and the skull. The fur is ripped off all over it. We think maybe wolves, a pack of wolves, maybe got to it. But I mean, it's amazing how quickly nature cleans up after itself, man.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, Iron Dogger that was on my show last weekend, we didn't get to show it, but her and her husband found this moose skull. Nothing peculiar about that. There was no skeleton with it. It was just the skull. That's a little peculiar. One of the antlers was snapped.
Oh, wow.
That's very peculiar. If it
That's
was fighting with another bull and it snapped its antler, it would have been where it walked away from the other bull, even if the fight with it killed it. How does it end up with this skull with a snapped off antler on one side laying next to it?
You got that right. Super Duke, 20 seconds. Tell them where they can find World Bigfoot Radio.
You can find me on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, and BitChute. I have groups on Facebook and over on the censorship-free platform MeWe. And I am now over on Twitter, or as Elon now calls it, X, where the X-Men hang out, like Professor X. So come on over there, find me, and visit me there.
We love you, man. Thank you for another great episode. We'll talk to you next week, Super Duke.
All right, buddy. Take care, everyone.
We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thal rocking in the background with Little Brother is watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Special thanks to everybody listening in at work, at home, in your cars, wherever you may be. Thank you to everyone in our chat rooms tonight. YouTube, Twitch, LGAP, Facebook, Spreaker, LinkedIn, the Space Travelers Club, and on X or Twitter, the hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Remember, this show is copyright by Spaced Out Radio and SOR Media Ventures Limited. Thank you so much for choosing to share your evening with us, because together, my friends,
we're watching.
We own the night. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Yes, the Woo Train has docked for the night. But soon, my friends, we shall ride again. Your seats are always available. Your tickets never expire. And if you want to bring a friend, we've got room for them too. Good night. Good solid show. Good solid show. Good job, guys. Y'all did well out there tonight. You did. Human Carl. Cool. Very cool. Right. Get rid of that. I need that for a second. All right. Oh, there we go. Now we're comfy. And so like this. Just give me a couple seconds here, guys. I'll do that. Perfect. All right, where do we start? Where do we begin? Try there. Paige Parker, how you doing? Cop. Cop. Dave, what's the boop doop? So sometimes when we go to break from your machines. Hi Robert Anthony. What's the boop doop sound? Sometimes you go to break. I don't know. Hi alien believers, how you doing? Yeah, I could do that, Derek. No, cancel this. Give me 2 seconds. I'm just having some computer issues here. Sometimes it's people who pop in and out of StreamYard. That is sometimes it. Well, thank you, Vanessa. You can see all of this and more in person May 10th through 12th, 2024, Reno, Nevada, for the SOR fan party. Yes, you can. Oh, no, I'm not stressed at all. Just my wiry hair going all over the place. I am tired. We'll say that I am tired. Right on, Sapphire. All right. My computer's giving me a little bit of issue tonight. So I'm going to get on out of here and see if I can speed up this editing process. And tomorrow night on the show, Lorian Fenton is here. Tim Mothman's favorite. We're going to be talking a lot of UFO stuff and kind of go from there. We're going to be focusing on a lot of UFO stuff here coming up here pretty soon. So, well, actually, like now. So, thank you tonight to Grant, T-Bone, ×4, Pam, Ant-Man, Mark, Maureen, Mennonite Abe, Charles, and Faze Will for the super chats. I don't think I'm missing anybody. No. And we'll see you all tomorrow night, everyone.
Stay healthy, my friend.
You too.
You need bail money, give me a call.
Always, Dad. Take care.
You too.